Chapter 835. The mystical silver fox was a nightmare in the depths of the souls of Japanese cultivators. This evil existence was like a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. No one knew when the sword would fall. Most of the Japanese cultivators did not go through the thunder retribution, and no one had the ability to completely destroy the mystical silver fox. They could only seal it. Therefore, the Tiantai sect and the Abe family guarded the seal of the mystical silver fox from generation to generation, trembling with fear. But as time went by, after more than 900 years, even the most determined immortals would lose their vigilance over the long period of time. That was until that earth-shattering roar came from Kyoto, Japan. Who can stop me? Only then did the Japanese cultivation world wake up from a dream and recall the terrible history of the Emperor of Toba. After the escape of the mystical silver fox, the Japanese cultivation world organized a large-scale crusade army, but it was sunk by Li Jiandong on his own halfway. The defeat in this battle greatly weakened the morale of the Japanese cultivation world. No one wanted to think about the mystical silver fox. "Nanny, we can't even beat a little girl. How can we deal with the mystical silver fox? Fuck, let's wash and sleep." However, this kind of ostrich mentality did not let them live a few days of peace. What should come would come eventually, just a little later and a little earlier. Hearing that the mystical silver fox had suddenly appeared in Suyi, Ise Chuyun and Ise Xinguang really felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave, and their bodies were cold all over. At this time, the mystical silver fox appeared in Suyi, where she had been sealed. Why didn't she sweep over the sects of the Japanese cultivation world one by one and defeat them one by one? Instead, she chose to take the initiative to appear in Suyi. What does this mean? Has the mystical silver fox recovered her full strength? Does she want to pay the blood debt in this place? All the things that Ise Chuyun was about to understand before disappeared in an instant, and deep fear rose in his mind. The stronger a person was, the more he would understand the horror of the mystical silver fox. It was like the bigger a circle was, the larger the area it came into contact with, and the more he knew how big the world was. 900 years ago, the whole Japanese cultivation world joined forces with 80,000 elite soldiers to defeat the mystical silver fox. What about now? What were the odds of winning against the mystical silver fox with the decadent morale of the newly defeated army? Ise Shenko, who had always been a bit cynical, had a serious look on his face. He knew that this matter had put the Japanese cultivation world on the line. He turned his head and said to the monk in front of him, "Let's go to Sumo." This kind of thing happened in Kyoto, Osaka, and other places in Japan. In an instant, the cultivation world of Japan turned out in full force. Almost all the masters carefully planned for the future before they went out, or some sects simply went out in full force. If they couldn't defeat the mystical silver fox, they wouldn't want to live. The land area of Japan was only 310,000 square kilometers. It was not even as big as China's Yunnan province. The entire country's land area was only about 3% of China's. If the weather forecast of China was reported one by one in the second-class cities, it would take 4 or 5 minutes. If it was reported one by one in the second-class cities, it would take half a day. However, the weather forecast of Japan could be summarized in one sentence: there would be rain in the whole country or no rain in the whole country. It was late at night, and the sky was so dark that one could hardly see their fingers. When it was raining in Mie County, it was also raining in Haima County, and it was pouring. Only at the moment of lightning and thunder could one see many small black spots in the sky flying toward Sumo in Haima County through the light of the lightning. About 10 miles around the Life and Death Stone scenic area in Sumo, the rolling hills were covered with cultivators of various sections. When Ise Xinguang and Ise Chuyun landed, they found that all the masters of the 3 Buddhist giants, the Tiantai sect, the Pure Land sect, and the Xinyan Tantrism, had arrived. Many masters of the large-scale sects of the Shintoism had also arrived. At this time, there were still many masters flying in the sky. Although flying in the sky at this time was easy to provoke the thunder retribution, in this urgent situation, in order to arrive as soon as possible, all the cultivators chose to fly here directly. If anyone was unlucky enough to be struck by the heavenly thunder, he could only say Umitba or shout Bakayalu, and then die. At this time, the cultivators of the various sects did not hold up their lanterns. Instead, they cast their magic. Some held a fireball that could not be extinguished by water, while others had a fireball that could not be blown away by wind and rain floating around them. Their figures were clearly illuminated. From afar, one could see the continuous flames on the mountain range, like a fire dragon. It was majestic and imposing. At first, the cultivators from the Japanese cultivation world didn't dare to light a fire at all. They were afraid that after the fire was lit, the enemy would be in the dark and the mystical silver fox would come over and clean them up. But slowly, more and more people from the Japanese cultivation world came, and the Japanese people gradually became bolder. No one knew who was the first to start a fire, but slowly others also started a fire. It was as if more people walked at night, and they became bolder. Their voices also became louder. When the cultivators of the major cultivation sects saw that Ise Chuyun and Ise Xinguang had also come, they were overjoyed. They all knew that these two were masters of the thunder retribution and were the leaders of the Japanese cultivation world. When they came, their momentum suddenly increased a lot. Some cultivators who were on good terms with Ise Chuyun and Ise Xinguang greeted them in a loud voice. Even in the thunderstorm, their voices spread far away, as if they were afraid that the mystical silver fox could not hear them. Ise Chuyun and Ise Xinguang, the two top experts of the Ise Shinto, looked at each other, their eyes full of worry. At this time, Abe Yoli, the patriarch of the Abe family, also came over with a tall and long sun hat. He looked at them with questioning eyes, as if asking if they had the confidence to fight. Ise Chuyun's face darkened. She shook her head slightly and sneered in a low voice, "Listen to the voices of these guys, a group of idiots. Can the loud voice scare the mystical silver fox away? They are almost scared out of their wits." Although Ise Chuyun's voice was low, some people next to him still heard it. They all looked at Ise Chuyun with displeased and reproachful eyes. Seeing this, Ise Xinguang immediately interrupted with a smile, "Oh, Yoli, what kind of weather is this? Don't you feel uncomfortable wearing such a hat?" Abe Yoli smiled bitterly. As the patriarch of the Abe family, as long as he went out, he naturally had to pay attention to his demeanor. This was the accumulation and demeanor of a 1,000-year-old family. Even if he died, he had to die gracefully. Abe Yoli raised his hands and clasped them in his long and wide white sun robe. He used his sleeves to hide his bitter smile and his voice. He said in a low voice, "Xinguang, I have a request." Although there was an incomparably fierce battle ahead, Ise Shenko still appeared sloppy. He behaved like a Japanese. His hands were tucked into his kimono, and his arms were not in the sleeves. Instead, they were protruding from his chest. He hugged his chest with one arm, and stroked his beard with the other. Ise Xinguang smiled and said, "Yoli, if you have anything to say, just say it. We have been friends for decades. You don't have to be so polite." Abe Yoli used his sleeves to cover his face. His face was serious, but his eyes were full of pleading. He said in a low voice, "This time, my son has to follow me to fight against the mystical silver fox. If I don't let him, he will commit suicide. Our Abe family has an irreconcilable blood feud with the mystical silver fox. Our Abe family will be the first to bear the brunt of the battle. In case something happens to me, you have to take care of my son." Ise Shinkuan immediately stopped smiling. He looked at the excited Abe not far away and couldn't help but sigh. A newborn calf is really not afraid of a tiger. With that, he withdrew his gaze and said very solemnly, "Don't worry, Yoli. I will take good care of him." As he said that, he smiled and said, "You're worrying too much, Ruli-san. We have many experts here. In terms of strength, we far exceed the Japanese cultivation world of 900 years ago. Moreover, Ruli-san is a very powerful great yin-yang master. Nothing will happen." Abe Yoli forced a smile and remained silent. After a while, Ase Chuyun suddenly turned his head and said to Abe Yoli, "Lord Abe, how did the mystical silver fox appear here?" Abe Yoli looked at several monks shivering in the cold wind and rain in the temple near Susano in the distance and said in a low voice, "They found that someone was crossing the thunder tribulation here. Out of curiosity, they went to check it out. Unexpectedly, when they checked, they found a nine-tailed fox entrenched in a hotel." Ise Chuyun frowned and said, "Didn't the mystical silver fox kill them?" Abe Yoli shook his head and said, "No, she must have let them go on purpose." Ise Chuyun took a deep breath and said, "She's coming at us in a menacing manner." Although it was quite unlucky to entrust an orphan to an orphan at the last moment, everyone's heart was heavy, as if a huge stone was pressing on it. Even the shouts of cultivators from various sects around them could not hide the fear in their hearts. They couldn't understand why the mystical silver fox dared to appear here all of a sudden, and why she would rather wait for all of them to gather than take the initiative to attack. Was she waiting for them to meet up and kill them all in one fell swoop? Thinking of this, the cultivators of all sects in the Japanese cultivation world were both angry and frightened. At the same time, in a small hotel in Suyi, Lu Feier stood in the yard in horror, looking at the continuous fire on the distant mountain range. Her eyes were full of fear as she looked at the mystical silver fox in front of her. After getting along these days, she also knew a lot about the past of the mystical silver fox, and she also knew that she was going to start a massacre here. Although the mystical silver fox's methods were a little fierce and cruel, after all, they were all members of the same clan. They were not outsiders who were not of the same clan. Most importantly, if the mystical silver fox died, she was afraid that she would be finished. She would definitely be regarded as an accomplice by the Japanese. She would probably die. She looked at the constantly twisting fire dragon in fear, and was even more frightened by the voices of many people coming from the mountain range. Lu Feier couldn't help asking, "There are so many people. Can you win?" The mystical silver fox's spiritual power and junshi still existed, but she had forgotten a lot of her understanding of magic and cultivation. It was equivalent to walking on her own cultivation path again. Because she had walked it before, it was very fast to walk again at this time. Li Jiandong had only passed the first round of Thunder Retribution, and she had already passed the 9th round of Thunder Retribution. It could be said that her cultivation had been restored. Except that she had not found her fox's real body, her spiritual power was no less than that of 900 years ago. At this time, the mystical silver fox was standing alone in the yard. It was empty around her. There was neither a guest nor a master. The innkeeper had already escaped. She stood alone in the rain. Although it was raining heavily around her, there was not a drop of rain on her body. The bean-sized raindrops hit the roof tiles and made a crackling sound like fried beans, but when they fell on her body, they were automatically bounced off. The figure of the mystical silver fox looked extremely delicate and weak. Compared with the dazzling fire dragon on the top of the mountain, she was too small. However, she was wearing a fiery red dress, and the two white fox tails under the dress were dragging on the ground like the hem of a skirt. The 7 golden fox tails rushed up and kept twisting. When the mystical silver fox heard Lu Feier's words, she looked up at the fire on the mountain range and suddenly sneered, "These cowards. They're just a bunch of mobs. I treat them like dirt and clay dogs." Lu Feier didn't believe it in her heart. Her gaze was seen by the mystical silver fox. The mystical silver fox immediately snorted and said, "You don't believe it? Well, watch me kill the enemy." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure moved and quickly disappeared from where she was, leaving only a faint afterimage that slowly disappeared. Almost at the same time, the fire on the distant mountain range was bright, and the fire dragon quickly twisted and churned. After a while, the mystical silver fox appeared in the same place again, covered in blood, holding 2 bloody heads in her hands. At this time, the afterimage left by her had not disappeared, and the cries of surprise, screams, and curses from the distant mountain range could be clearly heard, and they could not be heard for a long time. At this moment, Lu Feier was really stunned. She knew that the mystical silver fox, a monster known as the Uzeo in Japan, was very strong, but she didn't expect that the mystical silver fox was so strong. The mystical silver fox threw the two heads on the ground, as if she were hitting grass bandits. She raised her head and laughed. Her voice was like waves, and it was sent out in waves. I'm the mystical silver fox. Who dares to fight with me? In an instant, the sound on the mountain range disappeared, and there was a dead silence between heaven and earth. There will be another update later, but don't wait. Chapter 836. The voice of the mystical silver fox shook the sky, almost shattering the courage of every Japanese cultivator and frightening their hearts. They didn't expect that the mystical silver fox would suddenly kill them. When they were unprepared, she killed 2 people in a row, took their heads, and left calmly. Her speed was as fast as lightning, so fast that even top cultivators like them couldn't react. In particular, the next words of the mystical silver fox made almost every Japanese cultivator's face turn red in an instant, especially the brothers of the 2 dead cultivators. They clenched their fists tightly, tears in their eyes, and blue veins and blood vessels on their faces. This was a great shame. The mystical silver fox had killed 2 people in a row in front of them and then retreated calmly. However, it was such a great shame and such monstrous hatred that these cultivators, who had lost their friends, suppressed their angry roars and buried them in their throats, as if there was an invisible mountain sitting on their throats. Not only them, but even Ise Chuyun and Ise Shinguang were also taken away by the momentum of the mystical silver fox. For a moment, they were stunned and couldn't come to their senses. But soon, their faces turned red and their eyes were wide open. Just when everyone was angry but didn't dare to say anything, suddenly, Abe Nakian, the reasonable son of the Abe family, roared angrily, Abe family, Abe Nakian is here. I dare to fight. This cry immediately made every Japanese cultivator feel ashamed. After all, they were all proud and arrogant masters, but for a moment, they were robbed of their momentum by the mystical silver fox. At this time, someone made the cry of a horse, and they immediately broke out. For a moment, the roars on the mountain range were like thunder, and there were bursts of curses. With so many peerless experts cursing at the same time, the sound was truly terrifying. Lu Feier only felt as if she was in a football stadium that could accommodate 100,000 people, and everyone in this football stadium was hysterically roaring at her. Her ears were almost deafened, and her heart and lungs were trembling non-stop. Lu Feier covered her ears, and her face became more and more frightened, as if she would be shocked to death by the voices of these people in the next second. However, the mystical silver fox stood in the yard, not afraid at all. Instead, she raised her head and laughed loudly. She said to Lu Feier with a proud face, "How is it? I said that this is a mob, right? They actually want a little child who hasn't even grown up to speak, so they dare to curse. Ha ha ha, a group of timid people, nothing to be afraid of." The mystical silver fox was so complacent that her words became half written and half spoken. Seeing that Lu Feier was so scared that she couldn't help herself, she smiled and said, "Don't be afraid. With me here, no one in the world can hurt you at all. If you think they're noisy, I'll stop them right now." After saying that, her figure instantly disappeared on the spot and suddenly appeared in the sky above the mountain range. In an instant, the mystical silver fox appeared in front of the cultivators of various sects in Japan. She opened her beautiful eyes, and her beautiful face was full of ferocious killing intent. She said condescendingly, "Who wants to die?" The cultivators of various sects in Japan had been cursing for a long time, but they didn't see the mystical silver fox appear. At this time, they suddenly saw her appear in front of them without warning. They were all shocked at once, and the cursing stopped abruptly. The earth-shattering curses disappeared in an instant. Seeing that they had stopped talking immediately, the silver fox asked sternly, "Who dares to come forward and die?" At this time, her 7 golden fox tails rose into the sky, as if they were going to cover the sky and the earth. Everyone felt that the dark sky in front of them had turned golden at this time. The momentum of the mystical silver fox was too terrible. She shouted 3 times in front of the crowd, but no one dared to answer. Abe Nakian, who had shouted for a fight before, felt that his whole body was paralyzed with fear. Not to mention standing up to fight, he couldn't even shout at this time. The mystical silver fox asked a few questions in a row. Seeing that no one dared to answer, she raised her head and laughed 3 times. Her figure flashed, and her fox tail reached into the crowd. Then she turned into a shadow and disappeared. When the crowd saw that the shadow had completely disappeared, a pillar of blood shot up into the sky. It was the cultivator of the Deshang sect who had been beheaded at some point. At this time, blood spurted out from his neck. Everyone was shocked and horrified. At this time, they didn't even have the courage to curse. Their hearts were cold. Ise Chuyun and Ise Xinguang looked at each other, and the fear in each other's hearts was hard to control. They all knew that the mystical silver fox was so free to come and go. In terms of momentum, it completely overwhelmed so many people here. It was not only because they had a natural fear of the mystical silver fox, but also because the mystical silver fox had reached an unimaginable realm. Most of their understanding of the silver fox came from the text. Moreover, in their opinion, the Japanese cultivation world 900 years ago was completely a vassal of the Chinese cultivation world. Their relationship was like that of a teacher and a student. At that time, the Chinese cultivation world was in a very prosperous state, while the Japanese cultivation world had just started. Even if the cultivators at that time were powerful, they must have been extremely limited. Now, after 900 years of development, were they not as good as the ancients? Moreover, in the past 100 years, the Japanese cultivation world had won many times over the Chinese cultivation world, which had made them more and more arrogant. It was not until Li Jiandong beat them up that they calmed down a little and began to realize the power and terror of the silver fox. Was the immovable wisdom king powerful enough? But in those days, the reincarnation of the immovable wisdom king had also gathered a large group of cultivators to break up the soul of the silver fox. Li Jiandong, the reincarnation of the wisdom king, could beat them like this with his own strength. What about the silver fox? Therefore, Li Jiandong had dealt a very serious blow to the Japanese cultivation world. When they faced the silver fox, they had already lost their morale before the battle. Moreover, more importantly, none of them realized that the Japanese cultivation world could only stare at the strongest demon in Japan, Yamada no Orochi, and could do nothing about it. They could only wait for the silver fox to deal with Yamada no Orochi. Only then did some scholars jump out to beautify themselves, saying that Susanoo had killed Yamada no Orochi. Anyway, the silver fox had been sealed at this time. No matter how they boasted, no one would cause trouble for them. The Japanese cultivation world couldn't beat Yamada no Orochi together, and Yamada no Orochi didn't have any temper when it met a mystical silver fox with only 1 soul and 2 souls left. Then why could these Japanese cultivators beat mystical silver fox together? In fact, what played a very important role in this was the 80,000 soldiers sent by the heavenly bird feather emperor. These 80,000 soldiers were all mortals, and they were very strong and fearless of death. They rushed toward the silver fox with mystical luck like crazy, which made the silver fox with mystical luck afraid to take action. On the one hand, she had to deal with the fierce attacks of the cultivators, and on the other hand, she had to be careful not to kill more mortals and quickly provoke the divine tribulation. As a result, her cultivation was greatly reduced, and her amazing speed was nailed to the ground and she could not use it. In the end, she was swarmed by a group of cultivators and finally knocked to the ground. However, after the matter was over, no one in the cultivation world admitted the role of these 80,000 soldiers. They just wanted to stick all the credit of sealing the silver fox with mystical luck on their faces. Even if they wanted to share it with other sects, they would not be willing to do anything. They argued with each other until their faces were red. How could they be willing to share the credit with ordinary mortals? Therefore, up to now, no cultivator had thought of this point. Besides, even if wise men like Ise Chuyun and Ise Xinguang had thought of it, there was nothing they could do. Could it be possible to organize 80,000 Japanese soldiers to attack the Silver Fox with mystical luck? How many people were there in the Japanese self-defense forces? Besides, it was no longer the era of the unity of politics and religion in Japan. Now the separation of politics and religion, the affairs of the cultivation world should be handled by themselves, and it would never be publicized to the outside world. To say the least, even if so many people were really organized to attack the Silver Fox with live ammunition, it would be amazing and the odds of winning would be great, but if these soldiers of the self-defense forces, who had fled countless times when they encountered the explosion of the Fukushima nuclear power plant, were really going to face the Silver Fox with mystical luck, then it was better to say, fuck, wash and sleep. When the Silver Fox with mystical luck returned to the yard, she was carrying 2 more heads in her hands. She threw them on the ground and said with a laugh, "How is it? Is it quiet now?" Lu Feier couldn't help but put down her hand and looked at the Silver Fox with a face full of shock. She couldn't believe that there was such a strong person in the world. Lu Feier was speechless for a moment. The Silver Fox with mystical luck's face was full of pride. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard an even more terrifying curse coming from the mountain range. Then, countless spells were bombarded into the yard. The mystical Silver Fox was furious. In an instant, she rose into the air and waved her 7 golden tails. Like a huge cattail leaf fan that blotted out the sky and the earth, she swept all the magic spells back in an instant. For a moment, the people on the top of the mountain were in a mess. The Silver Fox with mystical luck felt that she had lost face in front of Lu Feier, and her killing intent rose in her heart. Her figure flashed, and in an instant, she flew towards the young man who had cursed the most fiercely. She remembered that the young man had clearly said that he was a member of the Abe family. The Silver Fox with mystical luck laughed grimly in her heart. The Abe family? That's great. I can use you as an example. She suddenly appeared in front of Abe Neazan, and her 5 fingers were like hooks, grabbing towards the top of his head. With this grab, even a Vajra bronze statue would be crushed by her. Abe Neazan was so scared that his eyes stared blankly. He didn't even have the consciousness to dodge or resist, and his mind was blank. On the other hand, Abe Yoli, who was eager to protect his children, roared and rushed out in an instant. His spirit Shikigami also rushed towards the Silver Fox with mystical luck crazily. The Silver Fox with mystical luck didn't even look at it. With just 1 punch, she smashed the spirit Shikigami into pieces with a bang. At the same time, she rushed to the front of Abe Yoli like a hot knife through butter. Another punch was aimed at the front of Abe Yoli's chest. Ise Shinguang and Ise Chuyun, who were next to him, were shocked and rushed towards the Silver Fox with mystical luck. Their cultivation was extremely high. At this time, when they attacked at the same time, their power was amazing, and the earth was shaken. But the speed of the Silver Fox with mystical luck was amazing. When they rushed in front of her, she had already punched through Abe Yoli's chest. At the same time, when she quickly stretched out her hand, she gently wiped Abe Yoli's neck with the tip of her finger. This slender hand was like a sickle cutting chives. She cut off the head of the famous great Yin-Yang master of Japan and sent it flying into the sky. The headless body of Abe Yoli didn't move at all. Blood gushed out of his chest, and the blood on his neck soared to the sky for more than 3 meters. After the blood splashed down, it still became cold, and Abe Yoli's head was full of ferociousness. The young master Abe stared at his father's body with his eyes wide open. After the blood drained in an instant, he finally shook a few times and fell heavily to the ground. At this time, in the crowd, where the wild laughter of the Silver Fox with mystical luck sounded, there was blood soaring into the sky. The mountain range had already become a piece of land. Countless masters were chasing after the Silver Fox with mystical luck, but they couldn't even touch one of her fingers. At this moment, Abe Yoli didn't even feel the anger and pain of losing his father. He thought desperately, Amaterasu God. If this is a nightmare, then let this nightmare wake up as soon as possible. Please. The cultivators in the Japanese cultivation world had expected that this would be a bitter battle, but they hadn't expected that it would be an overwhelming massacre. Chapter 837. In the blink of an eye, the mystical silver fox had killed through the cultivators of various sects in Japan. For a time, the top of the mountain was covered with blood. Heads were rolling on the ground, and there were endless wails and screams. The experts of various sects who were chasing after the mystical silver fox felt their hearts turn cold. The more they chased, the more desperate they became. Their speed was not slow. On the contrary, it could also be described as a flash of lightning. In the eyes of ordinary people, it was as fast as thunder and fierce as angry. But no matter how fast they were, they could not compare with the mystical silver fox. The speed of the mystical silver fox had even surpassed that of a flash of lightning. Although it seemed to be a little faster than them, it was a gap that they could not surpass. They could only follow behind the mystical silver fox and eat the dust. They watched her back fight in the crowd, like a tiger entering a flock of sheep. This was the martial arts in the world. There was nothing that could not be broken, only speed could not be broken. There was a limit to the human body's reaction. Although most cultivators had broken through the reaction limit of mortals, there was a lower limit after all. At this time, the limit of their reaction could not keep up with the speed of the mystical silver fox. They clearly saw that she had pounced on them. They wanted to raise their hands to cast spells to resist, but their brains could not react, and their bodies could not react. As soon as they raised their hands, the mystical silver fox had already punched through their chests. When their blood flowed rapidly and they were ready to cast spells, the slender hands of the mystical silver fox had already cut through their necks like sickles, and the blood in their heads and necks soared into the sky. After all, Ase Chuyun was an extremely outstanding cultivator in the Japanese cultivation world. She could tell at a glance that if they continued to fight like this, they would be wiped out by the mystical silver fox. She immediately said in a stern voice, "Everyone, the yang spirit will fight." The reaction speed of the yang spirit was far faster than that of the human body. It could even be said that it could reach the realm of following one's mind and body. As soon as Ise Chuyun shouted, these Japanese cultivators suddenly came to their senses one by one, and the yang spirit came out of their bodies one after another. As soon as they came out of their bodies, they immediately caught up with the mystical silver fox. Everyone was in high spirits. They shouted angrily and pounced on the mystical silver fox. For a moment, the mystical silver fox was surrounded by people from all directions. She couldn't show her speed for a while, but she was proud and fearless. She shouted, "Come on." After that, her hands flew, and the 7 golden fox tails swept around like steel whips. All around her, there was an incomparably ferocious gale. Wherever her golden fox tail swept past, rocks would immediately shatter, and people would immediately be sent flying. Up, down, left and right, there wasn't the slightest flaw. At her level of cultivation, in a close combat like this, spells and magic treasures became secondary. At this moment, even her pair of seemingly weak hands had become a terrifying killing machine. Anyone who touched her would die. Even if they didn't die, their bones would be broken. It was as if her whole body was filled with magic treasures, and every move she made was full of spells. Although the cultivators of the various sects in Japan had an overwhelming advantage in number, they were all fighting on their own. Some of the sects that wanted to form a formation could not form a formation for a while because of the scene. The mystical silver fox came and went like a ghost. This situation was really getting worse and worse, and the more the Japanese fought, the more desperate they became. After the mystical silver fox killed a few people in the crowd, she was already bathed in blood, as if she was wearing a blood-red battle robe. She laughed loudly and said, "Weak, weak. It's too weak. I didn't expect that after 900 years, the subordinates of Niaoyu, the trash, would be so weak. Ridiculous, really ridiculous." When everyone heard this, they were furious. They wanted to crush the mystical silver fox into powder immediately, but this kind of thought could only be thought of. None of them could keep up with the speed of the mystical silver fox, and no one could break the defense of the mystical silver fox's golden tail. Now the mystical silver fox was fighting with them in close combat with her own speed, and she had the golden tail to protect her body. It could be said that she was the only one who could hit others, and no one else could hit her. There were many people in the Japanese cultivation world, and there were many masters, but they lacked a top master who could entangle her. In the past, even if the Chinese cultivation world had encircled and suppressed the mystical silver fox, it was all thanks to the reincarnated Wisdom King who had entangled the mystical silver fox with his own strength, so that she could not exert her speed. Only then could the others calmly set up a magic formation and cast magic, and finally break her almost invincible heavenly fox real body. At this time, the Japanese cultivators knew how earth-shattering the battle between Suyi more than 900 years ago was, and how unprecedented the battle in the Chinese cultivation world 1,000 years ago was. These two battles between China and Japan were all because of one person. Only when they were facing this big devil did they understand how powerful their predecessors were more than 900 years ago. They could actually seal the mystical silver fox. However, what shocked them the most was that 1,000 years ago, the Chinese cultivation world had been able to defeat the mystical silver fox with a complete soul and the heavenly fox real body. How strong would he have to be to defeat such a powerful figure who was like a god? The Japanese cultivators were almost desperate. After killing a few more people, the mystical silver fox instantly broke out of the crowd's encirclement. She looked disdainfully at the Japanese cultivators who had almost lost their confidence in fighting and sneered, "A bunch of good-for-nothings. Killing you is a waste of time and energy. Hurry up and get help. I won't fight with people who are eager to die." After that, her figure flashed and disappeared in an instant, leaving only a strange shadow with 7 golden tails dancing constantly. She slowly disappeared in the thunderstorm night. With a rumble of thunder, the lightning illuminated the world in an instant. The cultivators of all sects in Japan looked around and saw the corpses of their friends everywhere. Although there were still many surviving cultivation masters, their faces were ashen and their eyes were filled with fear. Even a proud person like Ise Chuyun couldn't help murmuring in a low voice in despair, "It's over. I've lost my spirit. How can I fight again?" At this time, Ise Shingguang was also covered in blood, but most of it was the blood that had been splashed by the mystical silver fox. At this time, he no longer had a carefree look. Instead, his face was ferocious and nervous. He said in a deep voice, "The experts of all sects haven't arrived yet. When everyone is here, we'll set up the formation and fight again. We may not lose." Ise Chuyun shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "It's useless. There's already a devil in their hearts. No matter how hard they fight, it's useless. Look at it yourself. Do they dare to face the mystical silver fox again? Even if all the experts came, they would be shocked by the horrible scene in front of them and be afraid. Lord Shingguang, we lack a lion. If a lion led a flock of sheep, it could also defeat a flock of lions led by a sheep." At this time, the lowest cultivation quotient of the cultivators of all sects in Japan was at the top level of yang spirit. It could be said that there were many masters here. The number of masters was higher than that of the Chinese cultivation world. However, at this time, the number could not defeat the quality. A mystical silver fox had completely defeated them. Ise Shingguang looked at the field, only to see that almost everyone on the field was standing still, as if they were walking corpses. The mystical silver fox had completely destroyed their self-confidence. Among them, the monk soldiers of the Pure Land True sect were especially obvious. At the beginning, the momentum of this group of monk soldiers was extremely strong, and they looked arrogant. But at this time, they were like clay puppets, and their eyes were empty. Ise Shingguang's heart was filled with grief. He couldn't help shouting, "Is God going to destroy our Japanese cultivation world? Lord Shingguang!" At this time, a shout came from the side. Ise Shingguang turned his head and saw an old monk covered in blood coming over. The old monk was wearing a red cassock and had a solemn face. It was Kaisai Hikaryuni of Jinyin Tantrism. Ise Shinguang saw that although Kaisai Hikaryuni looked tired, there was no depression and despair between his eyebrows. He didn't dare to neglect him. He immediately saluted and said, "It turns out to be Master Kaisai Hikaryuni. Why are you here? If anything happens to you, who will lead the Jinyin Tantrism to continue moving forward?" Kaisai Hikaryuni sighed and returned the salute. "Amitba, how can there be an intact egg when the nest is overturned? Lord Shinguang, let's not talk about this. In the face of a great disaster, we should be more sincere and united. You are the pillar of our cultivation world. You should support the situation." Ise Shinguang sighed heavily and said, "The situation is hopeless, and I have no choice." Kaisai Hikaryuni's face suddenly changed. He stretched out his hand to slap Ise Shinguang and shouted, "Kill! As the leader of the Ise Shinto, how can you be so decadent? Are we going to sit still and wait for death? If we all think that there is no hope, then we might as well break all our fangs here." Kaisai Hikaryuni's voice came in waves in the dead silence of the rainy night, causing many cultivators to raise their heads. Ise Shinguang was also shocked by Kaisai Hikaryuni's shout. He immediately bowed down solemnly and said, "Thank you for your advice, Master. I understand." With that, he shouted at the crowd, "Everyone, it's too early to determine victory or defeat. Since our predecessors could seal the mystical silver fox once 900 years ago, we can still do it now. 1,000 years ago, the mystical silver fox could still be defeated when she was at her strongest. This shows that she is not invincible. Now she is arrogant and will definitely suffer. We must have a way to defeat her." The Japanese were the group of people who could withstand repression and torture the most in the world. Their endurance was the best in the world. This sentence shocked everyone's hearts, and they cheered up one after another. Many cultivators cheered each other up and encouraged each other. Ise Shinguang and Kaisai Hikaryuni breathed a sigh of relief when they saw this scene. The Japanese cultivation sects had never been so sincere and united as they were in front of them. Everyone shared a common enemy, gave up the idea of sects, and helped and supported each other. Kaisai Hikaryuni sighed and said, "That's right." However, Ise Chuyun said rudely, "Master Kaisai Hikaryuni, forgive me for being presumptuous. If we could defeat the mystical silver fox by inspiring our morale, we would have won just now." For a moment, Ise Chuyun's words immediately pulled Kaisai Hikaryuni and Ise Shinguang, the two leading figures in the Japanese cultivation world, into the cruel and cold reality. Yes, how can we deal with the mystical silver fox? Chapter 838. The mystical silver fox fought in and out of the crowd. Her whole body was bathed in blood, but she was not injured at all. When she returned to the courtyard, she could not hide her complacency. The resentment that had been sealed for 900 years was finally exhaled at this time. She looked at Lu Fei triumphantly and said, "Well? Are these people still making noise?" Lu Fei looked at the mystical silver fox as if she was worshipping a god. She shook her head and said, "Stop it, stop it." The mystical silver fox laughed and said, "These people are just clowns. If it weren't for the fact that I didn't have the real body of the heavenly fox 900 years ago, how could they have had the chance to ride on my head?" At this time, Lu Fei's fate had been tightly tied with that of the mystical silver fox. She couldn't help worrying about her. Her face was full of timidity. She asked tentatively, "But aren't you afraid that if you give them time to breathe now, they can accumulate strength in the end?" The mystical silver fox sneered and said, "By themselves? A bunch of people who thought highly of themselves. In the era of bird feathers, there were a few monks and yin-yang masters who had some ability, but now? Humph, a bunch of idiots who only know how to sleep and enjoy the fruits of our ancestors' labor." Lu Fei listened to her domineering words, but she didn't know that these Japanese cultivators had almost defeated the Chinese cultivation world. If they hadn't met the reincarnated Wisdom King, they wouldn't have been defeated so miserably today. As soon as they saw the mystical silver fox, they became soft. However, these people were definitely not pushovers. Many of them were master-level experts no matter where they were placed. Many of them were even grandmasters. However, in the eyes of the mystical silver fox, these masters were all vulnerable and worthless. How confident and domineering they were. Lu Fei swallowed her saliva and asked, "Then, what are you going to do next?" Mystical silver fox snorted and said, "Wait." "Wait?" Lu Fei blinked. The mystical silver fox nodded and said, "Yes, wait." Lu Fei asked in confusion, "Wait for what?" The mystical silver fox smiled and said, "Wait for them to find reinforcements." Lu Fei was shocked. "Ah. There are so many of them, and they have reinforcements?" The mystical silver fox snorted and said, "There are hundreds of millions of believers in Japan. It's not surprising that there are a few masters. However, for experts like them who cultivated their bodies and not their lives, it would be a waste no matter how many came. Why don't I ask them to come together so that I don't have to run around? I want to capture them all in one fell swoop." There was one more thing that the mystical silver fox didn't say. 900 years ago, the Japanese cultivation world came out in full force and sealed her here. Now, she wanted to take revenge here with her own hands and realize a 900-year reincarnation. Lu Fei hesitated for a moment. She didn't want to see the mystical silver fox die because of her arrogance. In that case, her little life would be lost with her. She thought for a moment, summoned up her courage and said, "Do they have any particularly powerful magic weapons, or killing skills or something like that?" The mystical silver fox was stunned when she heard this. She couldn't help laughing out loud. "I'm not afraid." Lu Fei couldn't help asking again, "Then?" The mystical silver fox interrupted her impatiently and said coldly, "Their only chance of winning now is to quickly go to all the major cultivation sects in China to ask for help. Otherwise, they have no chance of winning at all." Lu Fei's eyes widened. "Ah. They went to the cultivation sects in our country to ask for help? Then, will the cultivation sects in our country agree?" The mystical silver fox sneered and snorted. She gritted her teeth and said, "They'd better agree, so that I won't have to run around and settle all the old and new grudges here." Lu Fei looked at the mystical silver fox with fear on her face and complained in her heart, "Oh my God, she's a lunatic. It's okay for her to provoke the cultivators of Japan alone, but she even wants to provoke the cultivators of China together. It's over. It's over. I'm dead this time." But soon, her heart skipped a beat. She suddenly thought of something and thought to herself, "By the way, will Li Jiandong come? Will he be a match for the mystical silver fox?" Lu Fei was thinking about it here. At this time, Ase Xinguang and the others were discussing the countermeasures. All the sects present here had elected a leader. Everyone gathered together to discuss how to deal with the mystical silver fox. Someone proposed to take out the 3 national magic treasures of Japan to deal with the mystical silver fox, but as soon as this proposal was put forward, it was rejected with a sneer. Why didn't Yasuo Abe and the others use these 3 great magic treasures to deal with the mystical silver fox? The reason is very simple, because it's useless. The 3 great magic treasures of Japan were the Yasakani no Kagami, the Kusanagi no Kagami, and the 8-foot mirror. Among them, the political and religious functions of the Yasakani no Kagami and the 8-foot mirror were obviously greater than the practical functions of fighting. Among the 3 great magic treasures, the only one with combat power was the Kusanagi no Kagami. The main reason why the Kusanagi no Kagami could be called the first of the 3 great magic treasures of Japan was that Susanoo had used it to cut off the head of Yamada no Orochi. But was it really cut by Susanoo? According to the legends written by the Japanese themselves, even if Susanoo had killed it, he had taken a lot of good wine and made Yamada no Orochi drunk before he did it. It could be seen that Susanoo, the sea god of Japan, did not dare to cause trouble for Yamada no Orochi at all. Even if the Kusanagi no Kagami in his hand was a divine weapon, its power was extremely limited. The cultivators of Japan had read all the Chinese classics. Naturally, they knew that no matter in ancient times or in the feudal era, cultivators had never done anything like getting a demon drunk and then cutting off its head. This was too cowardly. The people of Chinese disdained to do such a thing. They had always greeted with the powerful magic treasures in their hands. After a while of magic, the world would be quiet. On the divine land of China, there were countless treasures and rare beasts. What kind of terrible magic treasures could they not have? But what about Japan? It was not easy for the sea god, Susanoo, to refine a great magic treasure, but he still did not dare to face Yamada no Orochi head-on. Thinking about the masters who had killed demons in the Chinese cultivation world for thousands of years, which one of them did not have several powerful magic treasures? Which one of them was not earth-shattering and powerful? Especially Li Yundong, this young man, who had 3 or 4 powerful magical weapons by himself, each of which made them envious. Thinking of this, the Japanese cultivators could not help but burst into tears. Damn it! You can't afford to hurt a small country with a narrow land and scarce resources. What's more, now the 3 divine weapons were placed in the imperial palace in Tokyo, Japan. If they wanted to take them, they had to report to the Mikado first and get his approval. But if they went at this time, it would be equivalent to telling the Mikado, "Your Majesty, we are incompetent and have been abused by the mystical silver fox. Please take the 3 divine weapons to fight with me." But how could the Mikado not know how powerful these 3 divine weapons were? He would probably be choked in the face with wooden clogs, wouldn't he? F***ck, Susanoo did not dare to face Yamada no Orochi head-on with the Kusanagi no Orochi. Do you dare to face the mystical silver fox with the mystical silver fox who had defeated Yamada no Orochi? Have you eaten something wrong? It was a small matter to be scolded by the Mikado. If this matter spread out, all the sects would not be able to do business. Everyone would disband collectively, wash up and sleep. Therefore, the Japanese cultivation world could not take out the 3 divine weapons even if they were beaten to death. This was asking for trouble. After being denied, someone soon said timidly, "Then let's hurry up and set up the magic formation." But after saying this, the people of the other sects couldn't help but burst into tears again. Damn the magic formation. Didn't you see how many of our people were killed by the mystical silver fox just now? The magic formation was set up by a single sect. Now that many masters have been killed, how can they set up the magic formation? Don't you know the shortcoming theory? The power of the magic formation depends on the person with the lowest strength. Moreover, the cooperation must be extremely tacit. There are many masters here, but they are not on the same path. Do you want to play the magic formation with a temporary motley crew? Do you want to die? Aren't you afraid of the backfire of the magic formation? These words made everyone feel dejected again. Someone said angrily, "We can't do this, we can't do that. Are we going to ask the Chinese to be merciful and help us destroy the mystical silver fox?" After saying this, someone sneered and said, "Then we might as well cut our bellies together." However, Ise Shinguang and Kaisai Hikariuni looked at each other. Their eyes lit up at the same time and they blurted out, "This is feasible." Everyone was shocked. Was it feasible to cut their bellies open? 2 bosses, calm down. However, Kaisai Hikariuni put his palms together and said seriously, "I mean, it's feasible to ask for help from the people of China." When everyone heard this, there was a sudden uproar. What kind of joke was this? They had just come back from China with their faces covered in dirt. Now they were going to beg them in a humble manner? No, this was absolutely not possible. They were all proud and arrogant. How could they bear such a great humiliation? Ise Shinguang knelt in the rain, put his hands on his knees, leaned forward slightly, and said with a serious face, "Everyone, now is not the time to care about personal honor or disgrace. We have reached the edge of life and death. Everyone, look around. Now that we can let go of our sex, why can't we let go of our racial prejudice?" Everyone felt depressed when they heard this. Who didn't understand this logic? But they had just formed a group to go to China to play dungeons aggressively. At that time, they were very rude. Now that they were going to ask for help, would they agree? If they couldn't agree, wouldn't they lose face and fail to accomplish their task? Would they suffer a double loss? Kaisai Hikariuni was shrewd. He glanced at the expressions on the faces of the leaders of the sects around him and understood what they were worried about. He said, "Benefactors, many of us have been to China before and have sworn never to step into China again in our lives. Therefore, it's not suitable for us to go. Why don't we let those cultivators who haven't been there have a try? Even if it's a dead horse, it's better than sitting back and waiting for death, isn't it?" When everyone heard this, their eyes lit up. This was a good idea. They could send the younger generation to go. It wouldn't be shameful for the younger generation to ask the elders for help, would it? Besides, the cultivation world of China is separated by a strip of water. The mystical silver fox came from your side. You can't just sit back and do nothing, can you? If you destroy Japan, do you think you will be able to live a good life? The more these Japanese cultivators thought about it, the more feasible they felt. They clapped their hands and said, "Let's do it." However, after making the decision, they couldn't help but frown. Who should they send? Among the younger generation of the Japanese cultivation world, who could take on such a heavy responsibility? At that moment, someone thought of Abe Naomi, who had just lost his father, and said, "Mr. Naomi, you can go." Ise Xinguang subconsciously wanted to object, but he thought that if Abe Naomi went, on the one hand, he could get out of this dangerous place, and on the other hand, he would be able to complete his reasonable entrustment to Abe. On the other hand, he was indeed the best of the younger generation of Japan. It would not be shameful to send him out. At this time, he also said, "I think Tachibana Wakako of Mount Koya can also go." When everyone heard this, they nodded secretly. At this time, Kaisei Hikariuni clapped his hands and said, "That's settled. Let the two of them go together. It's not good for them to go together. A man and a woman are just right." Everyone promised and scattered. Kaisei Hikariuni also whispered a few words to the monks around him. After asking them to bring Tachibana Wakako, he fixed his eyes on the deep night. He knew that the cultivation world of China had been entangled for thousands of years. There were endless grievances and old feuds. The relationship between the two sides was complicated and sensitive. This time, they had come to ask for help. Could they get what they wanted? Would the Chinese cultivation world send someone? Chapter 839. After the slaughter, the mystical silver fox did not take the initiative to find trouble with the Japanese cultivation world. Instead, in front of the Japanese cultivation world, she continued to swagger through the thunderclouds. It seemed that she was still not satisfied with her current spiritual energy situation, so she was constantly absorbing the power of heaven. When the Japanese cultivation world saw this, they were all frightened, but there was no better way. They could only pray that the masters of all sects in the Japanese cultivation world would gather soon. In addition, they prayed that Abe Naomi and Tachibana Wakako could persuade the Chinese cultivation world to send people to support them. The Japanese cultivation world had a very subtle feeling about the Chinese cultivation world. Most of the monk soldiers of Shintoism and Pure Land True sect held a contemptuous attitude. The former was because although Shintoism itself was a native religion of Japan, for thousands of years, Chinese culture had spread to Japan. Shintoism combined Chinese Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. It could be said that the three religions were combined into one, and combined with Japan's own characteristics, it formed a unique religion. Since the Ming Dynasty, Japan had gradually sought to get rid of the influence of Chinese culture. After the Meiji Restoration, it had announced that it would leave Asia and enter Europe, completely disregarding China as its big brother. As a mainstream religion, Shintoism had set off a vigorous de-China movement. If they wanted to get rid of the cultural influence of a nation, they must first tamper with history and despise the other party. As for the monk soldiers of the Pure Land True sect, because of the many battles with the Chinese cultivation world in the past 100 years, they thought that most of the Chinese cultivators were cowards. When they went to the sect, basically all the top masters were in seclusion, and most of those who dared to challenge them could not defeat them. This made them develop a strong contempt for the dialogue. But at the same time, there were also a group of people in Shintoism and Buddhism who were close to and identified with China. This group of people came to China almost every year to find their roots and ancestors, to worship and burn incense. They thought that the Chinese and Japanese cultivation worlds were separated by a strip of water. No matter how deep the grudges were in the past, the cultures of the two countries were too close to be separated from each other. In particular, most of the Buddhist cultivators regarded China as the country where their Dharma originated, and most of them respected and affirmed the cultivation sects of Chinese Buddhism. Tachibana Wakako was a comprehensive product of Shintoism and Buddhism. She was a cultivator in Shintoism, but she grew up at the foot of Mount Koya. In the past, under the guidance of her master, she thought that there were no masters in the Chinese cultivation world, so she couldn't help but look down on them. However, after the Taoist assembly, Tachibana Wakako was scared to tears by Li Yundong's slap. After going back, she met her mother, Tsuruko Tachibana, who enlightened her. Only then did she respect the Chinese cultivation world. It turned out that there were experts in the Chinese cultivation world, and there was more than one. It turned out that not only was Li Yundong a great master, but Wang Yuanshan was also so strong in the past. Although Tachibana Wakako was young, she was considered precocious. She knew how heavy the burden on her shoulders was this time, so she didn't dare to neglect it. With awe and uneasiness in her heart, she set foot on the journey. In particular, after her mother, Masako Tachibana, was defeated by Li Yundong, she couldn't recover from the setback. She automatically gave up the position of the patriarch of the Tachibana family and returned the position to her mother, Tsuruko Tachibana. Tsuruko Tachibana was a typical pro-China party, so she naturally brought Tachibana Wakako, who she valued very much, to the pro-China party. But no matter how pro-China Tachibana Wakako was, she wouldn't show it too much, because Abe Nakian of the Abe family was with her. In terms of status, Abe Nakian was not inferior to her at all. In terms of age, he was older than her. Moreover, Japan had a social structure where men were superior to women. Women had a low status and were the vassals of men. Although the Tachibana family had always been famous for its strength in the cultivation world, Tachibana Wakako was young after all. After leaving the country, she subconsciously respected Abe Nakian everywhere and let him make the decision. She only followed closely beside him. Abe Nakian had just lost his father. If it were another young man, he would have been so decadent that he would have been crying all day long. However, his eyes were red all day long, and his face was calm. His eyes were full of determination and hatred. He was not like Tachibana Wakako, who had come to China and seen the top masters in the Chinese cultivation world. She had even fought with the reincarnated Wisdom King and knew his power and horror. In Abe Nakian's view, the young man, who was only a few years older than him, might not be as powerful as the legend said. However, Ise Shunlight and Kaisai Hikarioshi had repeatedly told him to invite Li Yundong, so he came doubtfully. This time, Abe Nakian and Tachibana Wakako went to China in a low-key manner. Both of them wore ordinary clothes. The man did not wear a robe with wide sleeves and a long skirt, nor did he wear a bone-like robe. The woman did not wear a beautiful kimono. The two of them looked no different from Chinese people. The cultivation world of Japan was very powerful. Before, many Japanese had come to Tiannan City to pay homage to the Desanxian. Naturally, it was impossible for them not to find out where Li Yundong was staying. After the two of them arrived at Tiannan City, it was still raining and thundering. Abe Naoko and Tachibana Wakako followed the map and found Li Yundong's home. After knocking on the door twice, someone quickly opened the door. Abe Nakian was a Yinyang master. He had opened the Yinyang eyes since he was a child. He was extremely sensitive to demons, ghosts, gods, and demons. He could recognize the real body of demons and ghosts at a glance. At a glance, he saw that the person who opened the door was a fox. This time, he was really angry from the bottom of his heart, and he was full of courage. Abe Nakian's father had been killed by the mystical silver fox. He hated the house and the crow, so naturally, he hated all the foxes. At this time, he found a fox in Li Yundong's house. He was really like an enemy meeting. His eyes were extremely red, and he was shocked and angry. He subconsciously cursed, "Fuck. Give me your life." After that, he took out a 5-pointed star talisman and slapped it at Ling Yu, who was opening the door. Ling Yu was shocked and immediately screamed. As soon as she shouted, she quickly covered her mouth. At this time, the others in the living room also rushed out one after another, and without saying a word, they went straight to Abe Nakian. Tachibana Wakako was even more shocked. She quickly grabbed Abe Nakian and shouted with all her might, "Mr. Nakian, calm down. They are Li Yundong's disciples." Although Abe Naoto was older than Tachibana Wakako, his cultivation was not as high as hers. When she stopped him, he couldn't release the talisman. He just struggled like crazy, roared like a wild beast, and shouted unpleasant words in his mouth. Fortunately, the foxes who rushed out at this time could not understand Japanese, so they did not know what he was saying. At this time, Chao Yi, Lu Yuehong, and the others were not there. Only Lin Miao was there. Lin Miao knew that he had only been in the door for a short time and had no right to speak, so he just stood by quietly. At this time, the door suddenly opened. Ruan Hongling rushed out of the door, frowned, and shouted in a low voice, "What's the noise? Don't you know that someone is going through thunder retribution?" Ise Shenguang had calculated everything, but he had not expected that Li Yundong and the others were still going through thunder retribution at this time. People who had never gone through thunder retribution would naturally not know how important this period of time was for Chinese cultivators. In his opinion, although Abe Nakian might hate the fox around Li Yundong, he thought that Li Yundong was a broad-minded gentleman, and at the same time, a great cultivator with profound cultivation. Not only would he restrain his subordinates, but he also had enough ability to deter Abe Nakian. But what he didn't expect was that Li Yundong and Su Chan were having a great time transcending the thunder tribulation at this time. The two of them were thousands of miles away, leaving only Ro here, protected by the other members of the Fox Zen sect. Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, and the others were also going through thunder retribution. It could be said that they were racing against time. Their young spirits were fighting against the heavenly thunder, so how could they care about these things in the door? Ruan Hongling usually had a close relationship with the little foxes. As soon as she opened her mouth and shouted, the door immediately became quiet. Then both sides closed the door, and a group of people blocked the staircase aisle, tightly packed. Ruan Hongling saw Tachibana Wakako and frowned. Her impression of Tachibana Wakako was still at the Taoist assembly. She shouted unhappily, "What are you doing here? Do you want to disturb my Shiji and Li Yundong's thunder retribution?" Since returning from the Taoist assembly, Tachibana Wakako had studied Chinese for a while under the influence of her mother. At this time, it was not a problem for her to talk. She quickly pulled Abe, who was in a state of rage, forward, lowered her head, and said respectfully, "We want to see Master Li Yundong." Ruan Hongling sneered and said, "What do you want to see him for? Do you want to cry?" Hearing her teasing, Tachibana Wakako blushed and said, "Ah, we have no malicious intentions this time. If you think that we came suddenly and were rude, please forgive us." As she said this, she knelt down gracefully. Chinese people thought that there was gold under their knees, so kneeling was a very big deal. However, the Japanese people's kneeling was just a common etiquette, and they knelt down as they pleased. The cultural difference between the two sides led to this kneeling. The expressions of Ruan Hongling and the hostile little foxes suddenly eased a lot. Ruan Hongling snorted and said in a softer tone, "You're good at talking. What do you want from Master Li Yundong?" Tachibana Wakako said respectfully, "We have something to say to your master face to face." Ruan Hongling frowned and said, "Didn't you hear what I just said? Is he going through thunder retribution now? Look at my lips, thunder retribution." Do you understand what it means to go through thunder retribution? Tachibana Wakako raised her head anxiously and said, but we really have something urgent to do. Before she could finish her words, Abe suddenly shouted and angrily spoke Japanese, Wakako, get up. This Li Yundong is in cahoots with the fox. Even if he is invited, he must be a helper of the mystical silver fox. We are blind to look for him. Tachibana Wakako looked at him with embarrassment. She immediately wanted to beg again, but Wan Hongling raised her eyebrows at this time, lowered her voice, gritted her teeth, and said angrily, what are you arguing about? Do you want to fight? Well, come on, little devil, how dare you be so arrogant here? Have you eaten arsenic? Are you tired of living? Abe could understand Chinese, but he could not speak it well. At this time, in a hurry, he naturally used his mother tongue. When he heard Wan Hongling's words, he became more and more furious. If it weren't for Tachibana Wakako holding him tightly, he would have already fought. At this time, Tachibana Wakako couldn't help but pull him and say loudly, Mr. Abe, you can't let yourself do it. Do you want to harm the entire Japanese cultivation world? Abe felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and he suddenly froze on the spot. His eyes were red, and he glared at Tachibana Wakako angrily. He gritted his teeth and said, tell them the words and see if they want to help. If they don't mean it, it's useless even if you kneel through the floor. Tachibana Wakako had no choice but to turn her head and tell Wan Hongling what she had come for. Wan Hongling and the little foxes next to her were all shocked. What? The mystical silver fox has been resurrected? As the little foxes of the Fox Zen sect, when they heard that the greatest figure in their sect had been resurrected, they naturally felt refreshed. They didn't think that it was a bad thing at all. They were all overjoyed, which only made Abe, who was next to them, even angrier. He sneered again and again. Only Wan Hongling looked solemn. She asked in a deep voice, are you here to ask for help? Tachibana Wakako prostrated herself on the ground and begged in a voice that was almost crying, yes, we have suffered heavy casualties now. Master Li Yundong, please help us for the sake of the fact that the cultivation world of China and Japan are separated by a strip of water. After she finished speaking, the little foxes next to her said sarcastically, Humph, before you shouted to fight and kill, now that you are in trouble, you think of us? What have you been doing before? Although this was what Wan Hongling was thinking, she knew that she needed to take up the responsibility now, so she said seriously, I understand what you mean, but I can't make the decision. Moreover, Li Yundong is indeed undergoing the tribulation in seclusion. Even if the sky falls down now, it's useless. We can only wait for his yang spirit to come back. Tachibana Wakako was greatly disappointed and looked at her with almost desperate eyes. At this time, Abe was even more furious and shouted angrily, Tachibana Wakako, get up. Even if all of us are broken, we can't beg others like this. After that, he flicked his sleeves and left angrily. Tachibana Wakako had no choice but to stand up in panic. She bent down and bowed to Wan Hongling, Lin Miao, and the little foxes. She said with tears in her eyes, please convey my message to Master Li Yundong. If he is willing to help, we will always remember his good deeds. Please. Although Wan Hongling also hated the Japanese, she felt quite uncomfortable when she saw a little girl like Tachibana Wakako crying like a pear blossom in the rain. She had no choice but to nod in agreement. Seeing her nod, Tachibana Wakako felt a little relieved and went downstairs. However, in this strange city, she only felt that the world was vast and boundless. She was at a loss, but she didn't know where to go now that she couldn't ask for help. Chapter 840. Tachibana Wakako stood downstairs of Li Yunyang's house and cried silently. Abe Naoto, who was beside her, also calmed down at this time. He knew that he was young and impulsive, but he didn't think that his judgment was wrong. A person who was in cahoots with the fox spirit asked him to crusade against the mystical silver fox. Are you kidding me? Speaking of which, although the two wise men, Kaisai Hikarioshi and Ise Kanemitsu, had predicted that there might be such trouble, and had tried to help him, but at that time, Abe Naoto's mind was filled with anger and hatred, and he did not listen to what they said. Abe Naoto had messed up the matter. Although he was a little afraid and regretful, he still refused to admit his mistake. He just scolded Tachibana Wakako, "Don't cry. Let's go back. The Chinese cultivation world is full of cowards. They won't help us. In the world, only self-improvement and self-help is the right way." How could Tachibana Wakako believe his words? But she couldn't disobey him face to face, so she could only say, "But if we go back like this, we will be ashamed of the great trust of our predecessors." Abe Naoto was silent. After a long time, he said, "Is there only one master in the Chinese cultivation world? This person is a little older than us, so he must be very strong. Why don't we go and ask the cultivators of other sects for help? What do you think?" This sentence suddenly woke Tachibana Wakako up. She suddenly thought, "Yes, didn't my mother say that there is a great master named Wang Yuanshan in the Chinese cultivation world? It should be possible to ask him to help, right? Moreover, for the sake of his mother, he should also lend a helping hand, right?" Thinking of this, Tachibana Wakako was overjoyed and said, "By the way, let's go to the Juni school and ask for help from Wang Yuanshan." Wang Yuanshan? Abe Naoto was a little confused. Who is this? Tachibana Wakako hadn't heard her mother talk about the relationship between Wang Yuanshan and Ao Wushuang, so at this time, she didn't tell Abe Naoto about the relationship between Wang Yuanshan and the fox spirit. She just told him that Wang Yuanshan had once defeated Tsuruko Tachibana, and Abe Naoto immediately let out a cry. Japan was a country that paid particular attention to the order of merit. There was an order of seniority between the young and the old. Abe Naoko himself was an outstanding young man. When someone like him heard that there was someone more outstanding than him, his first reaction was, impossible. How could he be so strong at such a young age? But when Abe heard that Wang Yuanshan was of the same generation as Tsuruko Tachibana, he immediately became much more respectful. Ah, he was an old senior. When he heard that he had completely defeated Tsuruko Tachibana, he was immediately filled with respect. Tsuruko Tachibana was also a top master in the Japanese cultivation world back then. Did he know why she suddenly resigned from the position of patriarch and went into seclusion? Now Abe Naoko knew that she went into seclusion after being defeated by Wang Yuanshan. To be able to defeat Lord Tsuruko Tachibana at that time, he must be an earth-shattering expert. Abe immediately said, "Okay, then let's go find him." However, Tsuruko Tachibana refused to move and said solemnly, "Mr. Naoto, you have to promise me that you can't be impulsive anymore. Our personal honor is a small matter. The survival of the cultivation world is a big matter." Being taught a lesson by a girl who was several years older than him, Abe Naoto felt a little ashamed. He nodded solemnly and promised solemnly, "This time, I won't fight back or scold back." After their discussion, they quickly set off for Mount Longhu. After arriving at the foot of Mount Longhu, they met a Taoist priest who seemed to be wandering around but was actually patrolling. Tachibana Wakako respectfully told them about her intention to visit Wang Yuanshan. Several Taoist priests immediately looked at each other and said, "Wait here for a while." With that, the Taoist priest walked to a place not far away and picked up his mobile phone to report the situation here. After a while, a slim female Taoist priest came down with a foreigner with deep eyes and a high nose. Before she got close, the female Taoist priest shouted loudly. Before she arrived, her voice reached them first. "Eldest Shiji is in seclusion, and so is eldest uncle. What's the matter?" This female Taoist priest was none other than Zhang Lufang. At this time, she was the most idle person in the Jini school. When she heard that there was something going on, she jumped down. Naturally, Li Sun followed her like a shadow. When the patrolling Taoist priest saw Zhang Lufang, he pointed at Tachibana Wakako and Abe and said, "There are two Japanese. They said that they wanted to see Shibo Wang." What should we do? Zhang Lufang blinked and looked at Tachibana Wakako curiously. She quickly recognized her and said in surprise, "Oh, aren't you Tachibana Wakako? What are you doing here?" Mount Longhu was a famous mountain for thousands of years, and it was also the holy land of Taoism in China. Its reputation alone was above that of Zhenyan Tantrism. Moreover, for thousands of years, many people had ascended to immortality from Mount Longhu, so it was naturally majestic and magnificent. Its majesty was naturally not something that a grassroots team like the Fox Zen School could compare with. Even the proud Abe did not dare to be presumptuous in front of Mount Longhu. He lowered his eyes and said nothing. Tachibana Wakako said respectfully, "We want to see Zhenren Wang Yuanshan. We have something very important to report." Zhang Lufang giggled and said, "Shibo Wang is probably going through the Thunder Retribution. I'm afraid you won't be able to see him." Tachibana Wakako's heart immediately sank to the bottom. Ah. Is he also going through the Thunder Retribution? Zhang Lufang looked at them strangely. It's the Awakening Hibernation Festival now. Every minute and every second is as precious as gold. Why don't you hurry up and go through the Thunder Retribution? Tachibana Wakako was almost desperate. She couldn't help but cry. When will it end? Zhang Lufang thought for a moment and said, after the Awakening Hibernation Festival is the Spring Festival, and after the Spring Festival is the Qingming Festival and the Guyu Festival. At this time, it's not suitable to go through the Thunder Retribution. In this way, there should be more than 10 days left. Tachibana Wakako felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She couldn't help exclaiming in despair, "More than 10 days?" Seeing her expression, Abe Naoto's heart sank. He asked, "Wakako, what's wrong? Don't you want us to see him?" At this time, Tachibana Wakako's heart really sank to the bottom. She bit her lips, tears streaming down her face, and nodded heavily. Abe Naoto couldn't help raising his eyebrows. He said to Zhang Lufang in a very stiff Chinese language, "We have a very, very, very important matter. We want to see Wang Yuanshan." Zhang Lufang also put her hands on her hips, imitated his tone, and said, "Shibo Wang also has a very, very important matter. He can't see you." Abe Naoto was furious. He suddenly took a step back, took a deep breath, and roared loudly, "Wang Yuanshan, Wang Yuanshan." His cultivation was not low. As soon as he shouted, the mountains turned back, and his stiff voice could be heard everywhere. Zhang Lufang, a good-tempered person, couldn't help but frown and shout, "Hey, why don't you listen to me? I told you, Shibo Wang, he..." Before she could finish her words, she suddenly heard a magnetic voice next to her, saying gently, "Who's calling me?" Zhang Lufang was stunned. Then she turned around and saw a handsome man standing behind her. She didn't know when he had appeared here. She couldn't help but say in surprise, "Shibo Wang? You're here?" Then she said with some embarrassment, "I'm sorry, Shibo Wang. I disturbed you. I couldn't stop them." At this time, the two patrolling Taoist priests also came forward to greet Wang Yuanshan. Wang Yuanshan was easygoing. After returning the salute with a smile, he turned to Zhang Lufang and waved his hand. Then he looked at Tachibana Wakako and said with a smile, "You are Tsuruko Tachibana's daughter?" Tachibana Wakako didn't expect that she would see Wang Yuanshan again when she was at the end of her rope. She was so excited that her face turned red. "Yes, yes, no, no. Tsuruko Tachibana is my daughter." Wang Yuanshan was stunned for a moment, and then he sighed. It turns out to be her granddaughter. She looks so much like her. I thought she was a girl. Alas, time really flies, she already has a granddaughter. Then he sighed and said, "How is Tsuruko Tachibana now? Is she still fetching water?" The corners of Wang Yuanshan's mouth curled into a slight smile as he said this. It seemed that he was still a little proud of his prank back then. Tachibana Wakako quickly shook her head and said, "Thanks to you, she has now understood your teachings." She stopped fetching water and began to repair her 5 leaks. A strange light flashed in Wang Yuanshan's eyes. Ah! She understood it. She's not simple. Well, with her aptitude, if she can understand this, her future achievements will be limitless. Hearing his praise, Tachibana Wakako felt honored, and her face turned red with excitement. Wang Yuanshan's eyes soon fell on Abe Naomi again. His eyes were not sharp, but there was an invisible majesty in them. Moreover, in Abe Naomi's eyes, although this famous master was approachable, his whole body seemed to be integrated with heaven and earth, and his strength was unfathomable. Abe Naomi did not dare to be presumptuous. He stood respectfully and lowered his head to Wang Yuanshan's ear. Please forgive me for offending you just now. Wang Yuanshan smiled and said, What's your name? Abe Naomi said, My name is Abe Naomi, and I'm the patriarch of the Abe family. Wang Yuanshan frowned slightly. The patriarch of the Abe family? Then, his eyes flashed and his face froze. He also knew the Japanese cultivation world quite well. He knew that Abe Yuji should be in his prime, and it was impossible for him to die suddenly, or pass on the position of patriarch to such a young boy. He said in a deep voice, Abe Yuji is dead? Who killed him? Abe Naomi couldn't help kneeling down and crying, It's the mystical silver fox. Zhang Lufang and the 2 Taoist priests gasped in shock. Only Li Sen stood there in a daze. He didn't know who the mystical silver fox was. Wang Yuanshan's eyes became extremely complicated in an instant. He slowly looked back at the spirit mountain where he was, and then slowly looked in the direction of Tiannan City. He slowly closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, they were full of calmness and detachment, as if he had seen through life and death. Wang Yuanshan smiled slightly and said, I know why you are here. Are you here to ask for help? At this time, Tachibana Wakako also knelt down with Abe Naomi and cried, Yes, please forgive the past and help us. Wang Yuanshan smiled softly and said, Get up. Even if you don't ask, I will go. This is an agreement that was made 10 years ago. Tachibana Wakako was at a loss, not knowing what his last sentence meant. She just stood up with Abe. Wang Yuanshan turned around and bowed slightly to Zhang Lufang. He said, Go and tell Zhang Kongyun that I'm going to fulfill the agreement. Please ask him to fulfill the agreement. After that, he flicked his sleeves and walked out of the mountain leisurely. Zhang Lufang was confused and couldn't help shouting at Wang Yuanshan's back, Hey, what agreement? My master is going through the thunder retribution. Uncle Wang, hey, Uncle Wang. But no matter how she shouted, Wang Yuanshan did not turn around. When he walked out of the range of the mountain, suddenly there was a loud sound in the sky, and a bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, causing the earth to tremble. Zhang Lufang, Tachibana Wakako, and the others couldn't help raising their heads, but they suddenly saw 2 whirlpools appear in the clouds in the sky in an instant. They were like a pair of majestic eyes, staring at Wang Yuanshan. Wherever he went, the 2 pairs of eyes followed him. Although Wang Yuanshan was walking, his speed was extremely fast. In a short while, he was far away, and the rolling thunderclouds were also chasing after him, surging away. Chapter 841. Zhang Lufang was tongue-tied as she watched Wang Yuanshan go away. She suddenly had a feeling that this Shishu Wang, who had once been famous in the world, seemed to be gone forever. But this thought was only a moment, and something more important attracted her attention. The mystical silver fox had been resurrected. This was earth-shattering news. Zhang Lufang watched Wang Yuanshan go away in a daze. Suddenly, she was excited. This must be an earth-shattering battle. How can I miss such a good show? The eyes of this little Taoist nun, who was afraid of the world being in chaos, were shining with excitement, but she didn't think about it at all. What if the mystical silver fox wins? She turned around excitedly and ran up the mountain. At this time, Zhang Ling and Zhang Kongyun had both chosen to cultivate in seclusion. Zhang Tianshi was busy crossing the Thunder Tribulation, so he did not participate in the battle to encircle the mystical silver fox. The only person she could share this news with was Zhang Tianhe. Zhang Lufang ran up the mountain like a wisp of smoke. Li Sun, who was behind her, couldn't keep up with her. He stumbled behind her and shouted. Zhang Lufang quickly ran toward the side peak where Wang Yuanshan was. Before she got close, she saw from a distance that the entrance of the mountain was already full of people. There were Taoist priests everywhere. These Taoist priests seemed to be sitting cross-legged in a scattered manner, but Zhang Lufang could tell at a glance that their positions were in line with the Ziwei Star Palace. They were stepping on the seven-star magic formation under their feet. There were horsetail whisks in front of them and swords on their backs. It seemed that everyone was meditating with their eyes closed. However, as soon as Zhang Lufang approached, everyone opened their eyes. Their eyes were like countless sharp swords, staring at Zhang Lufang in unison. They were full of murderous intent, and the swords behind them jumped out with a clang. In an instant, the brilliance shone in all directions, and the sword qi rushed into the sky. Zhang Lufang had no doubt that as long as she took another step forward, she would be pierced through by the sword. The power of the Dharma array lay in its ability to repeatedly stack the cultivation bases of many cultivators of average strength together, forming a geometrical change in power. Although it was limited by the shortcoming theory, if a large Dharma array could find many cultivators of similar cultivation bases who worked well together, the power of the Dharma array would be far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Wang Yuanshan was known as the best in the world, but even he had to admit defeat when he met the Xian Tian sex-killing wolf extermination formation. He did not dare to enter the formation. It could be seen that there was a limit to one's strength. Even in the face of a formation, one had to admit defeat. However, the Dharma array was not something that just any sect could play with. First of all, the selection of the Dharma array was a huge challenge. Not only must everyone have the same intention, but their magic power and cultivation must also be of the same origin. Otherwise, if you went east and I went west, your cultivation would be rejected by me. How could you achieve the superposition of your magic power? Therefore, there were very few sects in the world that were qualified to play with the Dharma array. Only a few major cultivation sects such as Zhengyi School could practice a Dharma array of such a scale. Zhang Lufang recognized at a glance that this Dharma array was the 7 stars array. It had the outer 7 stars and the inner 7 stars. The outer 7 stars consisted of 3 people. The 3 people formed a corner and formed the outer 7 stars. In the middle stood 7 Taoist priests with higher cultivation bases. They stood alone and formed the inner 7 stars. Compared to the Xian Tian sex-killing wolf extermination formation, this Dharma array was not as powerful, but it was more flexible. It could be used to attack and defend. If someone wanted to break into the Dharma array from the outside, the Dharma array would be activated and the Dharma array would respond. The combination of the Dharma array and the Dharma array would be like the raging waves of the sea. Its power was infinite, and it could grind people to death. If they wanted to take the initiative to attack, they could also rely on their proficient body techniques and cooperation. The inner formation would launch a surprise attack and the outer formation would contain them. The attacks were endless and extremely terrifying. Zhang Lufang saw that the 7 people in the inner formation were using the Big Dipper as a shield. The one standing in front was Zhang Tianhe, who was holding the Big Dipper sword. Zhang Tianhe stood in the position of the Dubhe star, which was known as the sole god of the sun. The sword qi all over his body was awe-inspiring. Zhang Lufang immediately stopped, waved at Zhang Tianhe, and shouted, "Senior brother Tianhe, it's me. Can you let me come over?" Zhang Tianhe shook his head. Although his voice was calm, his tone was indescribably firm. "Junior sister, you should go back quickly. No one is allowed to come near here." Zhang Lufang asked curiously, "It's me. Can't I go too?" Zhang Tianhe said resolutely, "No one is allowed." Zhang Liufang's desire to share gossip with others was immediately dealt a blow. She looked resentful and disappointed as she looked at Zhang Tianhe. At that moment, Li Sen was out of breath and running over, covered in dirt from the fall. Zhang Lufang saw him and shouted angrily, "Let's go. Senior brother Tianhe has turned his back on us." After saying that, she walked down the mountain angrily. Li Sen was at a loss. He looked at Zhang Tianhe and the others, who were in a tight formation, and then looked at Zhang Lufang. In the end, he could only helplessly run down the mountain with her. At this moment, within the mountain cave behind Zhang Tianhe, every single talisman and rune hidden within the mountain cave glowed faintly. An indescribable force constantly flowed within the talisman and rune, like a myriad of rivers flowing along a river channel into a lake or ocean, ultimately forming into a terrifying tsunami. These forces slowly converged and fused, continuously climbing and extending towards the top of the magic circle. Finally, they converged at the entrance of a cave. An aura that was hard to be seen by the naked eye soared into the sky, supporting the two majestic thunderclouds in the sky to move towards the east. Zhang Lufang was still a young girl, and she was lively and playful. She never kept her mouth shut, so she couldn't hide anything from Zhang Tianhe. She couldn't find Zhang Tianhe to share this matter with, so she could only sulk and stare blankly, as if something was stifling in her heart. But soon, she suddenly remembered something. She quickly ran back to her residence, took out her mobile phone, and sent the news she knew to some of the Taoist friends of other sects with whom she had a good relationship. This time, the news spread. In the information age, there were no secrets that could be hidden. Suddenly, the whole cultivation world knew that the mystical silver fox had appeared in Suyi. Almost all cultivators knew that Wang Yuanshan had gone to Japan. At this time, the whole cultivation world was in an uproar. However, at this time, Tachibana Wakako and Abe Naoko didn't know that after they invited Wang Yuanshan, they didn't think of going to other sects to invite others. In their opinion, the only thing they lacked was a top master like Wang Yuanshan. They didn't lack other low-level masters at all. It could even be said that they could find a lot of them. Logically speaking, the two of them should be happy that they had finally invited a top master, but in fact, they were burning with anxiety. The reason was very simple, because Wang Yuanshan insisted on walking to Suyi. What a joke! Although Wang Yuanshan's one step was 10 steps for an ordinary person, he was still walking. How long would it take to walk to Japan like this? There was still the sea in the middle. But although Wang Yuanshan was amiable, he had a great bearing and a strong aura. Moreover, his reputation, age, and experience were all there, so the two Japanese juniors did not dare to breathe too loudly. They were afraid that they would say something wrong and provoke this great master to turn against them. If that happened, they would be in big trouble. However, after walking with Wang Yuanshan for a day and a night, the two of them finally walked out of Jiangxi province and entered Zhejiang province. At this speed, they were afraid that they would have to cross the sea, enter Nagasaki, cross Oita, go through Kobe, go to Kyoto, and then pass through Nagano and Gunma counties before they could reach Azaki County. How long would it take for him to walk like this? This time, Tachibana Wakako and Abe were so anxious that they scratched their ears and cheeks, like ants on a hot pan. They wanted to urge him, but they didn't dare to. Along the way, the two of them were so anxious that they seemed to be acting in a pantomime. They winked at each other and urged each other to speak. Wang Yuanshan didn't seem to know anything. He just kept walking forward with his hands clasped behind his back. Far behind him was a thundercloud. This thundercloud had been left far behind by him. From his point of view, he could only see a dark cloud faintly following in the distant sky. It wasn't something that would surprise anyone. Wang Yuanshan himself knew that he couldn't fly to Suyi at once. First, it would consume a lot of spiritual energy. He had to save every bit of spiritual energy and jinshi to entangle the mystical silver fox when he came. He didn't expect to be able to kill the mystical silver fox by himself. The only thing he had to do was to stall the mystical silver fox and wait for the arrival of the 9 heavens divine night thunder. If he flew too fast, the speed of the heavenly thunder would also increase greatly. When he flew to Suyi, the mystical silver fox would see such a big thundercloud following behind Wang Yuanshan. Would she run away? In those days, the mystical silver fox had been besieged and beaten by everyone. Even if she couldn't beat them, she would still run away. Would she foolishly wait for the 9 heavens' divine night thunder to come and take her away now? Therefore, he couldn't be fast even if he wanted to. However, he couldn't tell these words to these 2 Japanese friends. There was a saying in the Book of Changes, if the monarch is not secretive, he will lose his minister. If the minister is not secretive, he will lose his life. Therefore, a gentleman is cautious and does not come out. It means that if a person wants to achieve great things, he must first shut his mouth. Wang Yuanshan had cultivated for many years, and his bearing and self-restraint were first class. Naturally, he understood this truth. Tachibana Wakako and Abe followed behind Wang Yuanshan with sad faces. Finally, Tachibana Wakako couldn't help it. Relying on her young age, she pretended to be obedient and cute. She asked timidly, "Senior, when will we go like this? If we delay for 1 more minute now, it is very likely that the mystical silver fox will become stronger." Wang Yuanshan didn't stop. He turned his head and looked at her with a smile. He said, "Don't worry. No matter how strong she becomes, I have a way to deal with her." His words made Tachibana Wakako and Abe look at each other and calm down a little. But what they really wanted to say was, if we delay for 1 more minute, the Japanese cultivation world will suffer a greater loss. In fact, Abe even thought to himself, could it be that this great master wants to wait for the mystical silver fox to destroy our Japanese cultivation world and then take advantage of it? This sentence was a little selfish, but according to the entanglement of the cultivation world in China, it was not impossible. Wang Yuanshan also seemed to be aware of his thoughts. He turned his head and looked at him. His eyes were deep and penetrating. At once, Abe felt guilty and unconsciously lowered his head. Wang Yuanshan smiled slightly and said, "Don't look at the mystical silver fox. She is proud and arrogant. Since she let you call for help before, she won't make a move in advance. She will definitely wait for everyone to arrive before she makes a move." Abe boldly said, "But, Senior, if you hurry up, your chances of winning will be greater." Wang Yuanshan had a little entanglement with Tsuruko Tachibana back then. He couldn't speak Japanese, but he could understand some of it. He smiled and said, "You're wrong. If I'm slower, my chances of winning will be greater." Tachibana Wakako and Abe were shocked and asked in unison, "Why?" Wang Yuanshan smiled and said, "Because there are more reinforcements behind me." Tachibana Wakako and Abe looked at each other. They didn't know that the news of the mystical silver fox had quickly set off a wave in the Chinese cultivation world. Many sects had become active because of this. Chapter 842. The news of the mystical silver fox quickly spread to all the sects in the Chinese cultivation world, and many cultivators began to argue fiercely. The reason for their argument was also very simple. Should they go to support the Japanese cultivation world? The reason for their opposition was very simple. The Japanese cultivation world had invaded China with the army decades ago, causing great losses to the Chinese cultivation world. They hadn't settled this account yet. Why should they help them? The reason for their affirmative attitude was also very simple. Although the Chinese cultivation world had a deep grudge against them, the mystical silver fox was the common enemy of the whole cultivation world. At this time, there should be no difference between countries, let alone between sections. Otherwise, it would be self-destruction. Therefore, the most heated debate was between the younger generation of Buddhism and Taoism, such as Wei Qing and Yu Sheng. Because they were stuck in the Yangshan phase and could not break through to the Jinshan phase, every day after cultivation, they would log on to the website forum under the cultivation world to argue with others. Most of them were strongly opposed to it. The Buddhist cultivators, on the other hand, had a close relationship with the Buddhist cultivation world in Japan, so most of them had a positive and sympathetic attitude towards the Japanese cultivation world. The relationship between the Taoist cultivators and the Japanese cultivation world was thin, so the Taoist cultivators had a rather bad impression of the Japanese. However, the Buddhism of China and Japan could be said to be of the same origin. In addition, in recent years, the Buddhist cultivation world in China and Japan had been very close. Naturally, the Buddhist cultivators' rejection of the Japanese was relatively weak. Moreover, in the eyes of many Buddhist cultivators, there was no difference between countries or races in Buddhism. In those years, Master Huigua Ali, the seventh generation of Tangmi, foresaw the end of the Dharma ending period. Many of his Chinese disciples did not teach the true methods, but he taught all the true methods and magic treasures to a Japanese disciple who had just entered the sect for a month, Master Hirofa. Because he thought that only Hirofa could inherit his mantle, the purpose of passing on the magic treasures and true methods to him was to let Hirofa escape to Japan with Tangmi's true methods. After that, as expected, Tangmi completely disappeared from mainland China because of the three martial arts extermination movement. However, because Master Hongfa brought Tangmi to Japan and then founded Jinyan Tantrism, Tangmi continued to develop. Therefore, the cultivators of Chinese Buddhism believed that although there was friction between the cultivation world of China and Japan, in general, there were mutual benefits. Japan inherited the Dharma of China and eventually passed it down and carried it forward. The parts of the Dharma of China that were lost could also be found in Japan. As the saying went, if China was lost, it would be the barbarians. It was also because of this that the Buddhist cultivators had selected a large number of masters early on and set out for Japan. Among them, many experts from Shiyuan Temple, Hanshan Temple, Jinshan Temple, Wutai Mountain, and Putua Mountain had already arrived near Suyi. On the other hand, the Taoist cultivators were still arguing endlessly. Although Mount Wuhua was still a very small sect in the Chinese Taoist cultivation world, it was still a small sect, so the argument was inevitable. They were arguing fiercely with flushed faces. Some people strongly opposed going to Japan, while others thought that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and they should take the initiative to stand up for it. Song Guohua and Alba were watching from the side and did not participate. Song Guohua was a slippery person and did not want to offend either side. Alba's level of Chinese language was limited, and it was difficult for her to understand. She could only watch from the side, not knowing what these people were arguing about. While they were arguing, they suddenly heard a cold voice. "What are you arguing about?" Everyone turned their heads and saw that Ding Nan had come out of her cultivation residence. At this time, she was wearing a silk gown with excellent ventilation, and the knuckles under her feet were also hand-sewn silk. Silk was the most difficult material to make into clothes of the same kind. Because the material was too soft, it could only be sewn by hand. A slightly inferior tailor would not dare to take silk work at all, because a slight mistake in the needle or a slight knife could completely destroy a piece of silk. The Yin and Yang sects of Mount Wuhua were not rich, but Song Guohua, a flatterer, still tried his best to squeeze out some money to customize such a close-fitting silk dress for Ding Nan. The style of this silk dress was similar to a Tang suit, but the clothes were embroidered with a picture of 100 birds looking up to the phoenix. It was colorful and beautiful from head to toe. Ding Nan also had a very outstanding model figure. Even if she stood next to Li Yundong, she would not be much shorter. She was wearing this silk dress, which not only showed her exquisite figure, but also set off her extraordinary temperament and outstanding. Moreover, at this time, Ding Nan had broken through to the Jinshan phase, and her self-confidence had soared. She thought that this dress was very suitable for her, especially the picture of 100 birds looking up to the phoenix, which was in line with her inner thoughts. One day, she would make people like Zhou Qin crawl under her feet. In the beginning, Ding Nan only dared to play at the edge of the thunderclouds during the thunder tribulation. But as she practiced the Yin and Yang methods of the Yin and Yang sects, and it happened to be the period of waking up, the spiritual qi between heaven and earth was full. The Yin and Yang qi greatly increased her cultivation, causing her cultivation to soar at an astonishing speed. Although she did not break through to the thunder tribulation phase, she could already roll on the edge of the thunderclouds and withstand 1 or 2 heavenly thunders. This was not a big deal for those great masters who had long been famous, or for people like Li Yundong. But for Ding Nan, who had no identity or background and had never come into contact with cultivation before, it was already rare for her to be able to cultivate to such a level in just a few months by relying purely on opportunities and her own personal understanding. It was already a rare case in thousands of years. Ding Nan was also well aware of this. Just think about it, a year ago, she was still following Zhou Qin like a follower. In the scene of the upper class, she had to smile and curry favor with everyone she met. But now? She was already the leader of a sect, and her cultivation could go to heaven and earth. Those who she had to look up to in the past, now she could kill them with one finger. How could this not make her burst with confidence? When a person had strength, they would have self-confidence. When these two superimposed together, they could produce a qualitative change, and the temperament of the whole person would also change greatly. Especially after Ding Nan changed her clothes, it was as if she was wearing a dragon robe, and there was a very strong aura around her. As soon as she appeared, everyone was shocked by her aura, and they couldn't help but bow and flatter her. 5 Flowers Palm Sect, the spiritual power of the gods, I am the only one in the world. They had practiced these words very well before. At this time, when Ding Nan showed the matching strength and aura, they became more fluent in their speech, and there was no hindrance in their hearts. Even Alba, who was influenced by the company she kept, couldn't help but chuckle. She bent over awkwardly and said, "Things rise in the door, exert strength to pass through the kidneys, add injury to the low clouds, and envy the venerable." Her pronunciation was strange, and the cultivators of the 5 Flowers sect next to her all sneered in a low voice. But then Ding Nan's sharp eyes swept over them, and they immediately became serious, not daring to make a sound. At this time, Ding Nan's Palm sect was becoming more and more majestic, and she was enjoying the feeling of being the Palm sect more and more. It was like taking drugs, and it was difficult to get rid of them. She glanced at them majestically and said, "What are you arguing about? Don't you know that I'm cultivating in meditation?" Everyone was timid and looked at each other, not daring to speak. Only Song Guohua boldly said, "Palm sect, we're discussing whether we should go to Japan." Ding Nan frowned. What for? She had been cultivating in seclusion these days, so she naturally didn't know what had happened outside. Song Guohua told her what had happened and then said, "Palm sect, now all the sects are arguing about it. The bald donkeys of the Buddhist school have already set off. You see, At this time, if it were someone else, he would have to discuss it with his disciples. However, Ding Nan had been suffering enough from following Zhou Qin. Now that she was finally independent, she naturally wanted to act independently. She thought for a moment and thought to herself, this must be an earth-shattering battle. Although I don't know how powerful the mystical silver fox is, I have never seen it before. But since it can make so many sects in the cultivation world of the Middle Sun put down their prejudices and join hands to fight, it must be an extremely powerful opponent. Even Wang Yuanshan has gone, but I don't know, will that guy go? In Ding Nan's opinion, even if all the cultivation sects in the world went to Suyi, it would not be as good as the man named Li Yundong going to Suyi alone. If he went, she would have to go even if there were countless difficulties and dangers. Otherwise, what was the point of working so hard to get through the thunder tribulation? Wasn't it to prove herself in front of him? Besides, if he went to Suyi, Zhou Qin would also go. It was a good opportunity for her to show her spiritual power and cultivation quotient. Otherwise, if she cultivated such amazing cultivation but didn't show it in front of Li Yundong and Zhou Qin, wouldn't it be like walking in the dark in brocade clothes? Thinking of this, Ding Nan thought to herself, Li Yundong is known as the reincarnated wisdom king, and there are so many foxes under him. I think it's hard for me to stay out of it, right? He should go. At this time, Ding Nan no longer hesitated. She immediately said decisively, yes, all the cultivation sects in the world will go. How can we be absent? This is a good opportunity to prove to the cultivation world that we are the Yin-Yang sect. Her words were dignified, but in fact, she only wanted to prove herself to those two people. But her disciples couldn't hear it at all. They were so excited that they couldn't control themselves. One by one, they began to shout loudly. Seeing that Ding Nan had made up her mind, Song Guohua sighed in his heart. Then, he cheered up and prepared for their trip to Suyi, Japan. He knew that Ding Nan was very ostentatious. This time, she would also make a grand appearance. Therefore, he immediately arranged for everyone to dismantle and assemble Ding Nan's 8-bearer sedan chair. Only then did they take the cumbersome luggage and surround Ding Nan, who was ready. They went down the mountain in a lively manner, as if as soon as Ding Nan appeared, the mystical silver fox would flee at the sight of the wind. Ding Nan also looked at her entourage with pride. Her heart had already flown to a distant foreign country. She was thinking about how to meet Li Yundong and how to make Zhou Qin lose face. But she had never thought. If Li Yundong didn't go, and if they didn't defeat the mystical silver fox, what would the consequences be? Chapter 843. Dongwu City, Shantang Town. Early in the morning, Lu Yi woke up from his meditation. He was wearing a gray robe, navy blue silk pants, and cloth shoes with 1,000 soles. He looked like a burly and sturdy farmer, but his eyes were deeply set with a pair of black eyes, deep and distant. When his eyes focused, they were extremely penetrating. He was not handsome, but he had a strange appearance. His eyebrows were extremely long, and there was an air of wisdom between them. At this time, he was slowly buttoning his clothes. Mei Nyang was standing quietly next to him, watching him tidy up his clothes. In her impression, although Lu Yi was a very particular person on weekdays, he was very different today. Today, Lu Yi seemed to pay special attention to every button he fastened, as if he was about to go on a long journey. Although Mei Nyang was used to the man in front of her appearing and disappearing like a ghost, today she felt a little sad for no reason. "Are you going on a long journey?" Mei Nyang couldn't help but step forward. She stretched out her hand and tidied up the wrinkles on Lu Ye's clothes, like a little wife taking care of a man who was about to go on a long journey. Lu Yi looked at the woman in front of him with gentle eyes. He suddenly smiled and said, "Mei Nyang, how long have you been with me?" Mei Nyang couldn't help but roll her eyes at Lu Yi and said angrily, "You still have the nerve to say that? You suddenly appeared to save me, and then you disappeared again. This time, you disappeared for more than 10 years. Don't you know that I wanted to follow you back then?" Lu Yi smiled. The cunning former fox Zen master's smile was particularly warm at this time. He reached out his hand and stroked Mei Nyang's black hair. "You saved me first back then." Mei Nyang's eyes flashed. She couldn't help but think of the time when she was playing in the mountains when she was a child. She accidentally saved a seriously injured silver fox, but she didn't expect that it turned out to be a fox spirit. One day, when she was playing in the mountains and almost fell off a cliff, this fox spirit appeared and saved her life. Mei Nyang smiled softly and said, "Yes, you should have taken me with you back then. Why didn't you take me with you at that time? You made me take so many detours." Lu Yi let out a sigh. At that time, he had been trying his best to resurrect the mystical silver fox. At that time, he had offended a great master in the cultivation world and was being hunted all over the world. He couldn't protect himself. How could he have the time and mind to take a woman with him? But because of this delay, when he met her, she had already fallen to become a prostitute. The cute little boy in the past had already become a seductive little girl. Lu Yi looked at Mei Nyang lovingly, stretched out his hand to touch her cheek, and said softly, "At that time, he was." Mei Nyang couldn't help but tilt her head and greedily use her cheek to feel the warmth coming from the other party's palm. She said in a daze, "What's wrong with the child? Back then, I didn't despise you for being old, but now you despise me for being young?" Lu Yi laughed. Foxes were infatuated with love, regardless of gender. Once they identified a target, they would never change their mind. In his mind, he could betray everyone in the world, but he couldn't betray this woman in front of him. Lu Yi had always been cold-hearted and ruthless. He regarded all the people in the world as chess pieces, and he could not abandon them. Even Ao Wushuang, who was his most valued disciple, could be sacrificed, not to mention Su Chan and the other little foxes. In particular, he had watched his most favored disciple, Mo Ashi, be killed by Yen Fong and then replaced. But he had endured it without batting an eyelid, and even talked and laughed with his enemy for 9 years. How ruthless and cold-blooded was this? How much forbearance and perseverance was this? But when Lu Yi accidentally found that his little child had become a prostitute, his heart softened, and he felt a burst of heartache for no reason. So he had been taking care of her, helping her get out of the sea of suffering and no longer serving others. She had also accompanied him loyally and helped him manage his money. She waited without complaint or regret, as if she didn't notice that her youth was passing little by little. Lu Yi also knew that this time, when he went out, there would be a fierce battle of life and death. He had been preparing for more than 10 years for such an opportunity. Maybe this time, he could get what he wanted and win, and the Fox Zen sect would completely turn over. But he also knew that the greater the profit, the greater the risk. If he failed, the consequences would be unpredictable. Even if he was lucky enough to escape, he might never be able to see Mainyang again. Thinking of this, Lu Yi couldn't help but say to Mainyang, "I'm going out for a while. Maybe 3 or 5 or 7 days, maybe 3 or 5 or 7 years. I don't know, and I might not come back again." As he spoke, Lu Ye's eyes became softer and softer. He whispered, "If I don't come back after a week, don't wait for me. Leave here. I left a bankbook in the room. There's some money in it. It should be enough for you to spend in the future." Mainyang's body trembled slightly. She couldn't help but clench her hands, but she quickly loosened them. She smiled softly and reached out to touch Lu Ye's cheek. "What are you talking about? You know, I will always wait for you to come back. I'll stay here and I won't go anywhere." Lu Yi smiled and didn't say anything more. He turned around and walked out of the room. As soon as he walked out of the room, he saw Wang Jinyuan standing in the courtyard. Wang Jinyuan looked at him with interest, as if he had just met him for the first time. He smiled and said, "Jinren Lu, you finally came out." As soon as Lu Yi came out of the door, the tenderness in his eyes and the warm smile on his face disappeared in an instant, replaced by cold indifference and dignity. He glanced at Wang Jinyuan coldly and said in a cold voice, "Master Wan, are you ready?" Wang Jinyuan smiled and said, 10 years of preparation, just for today. How can I not be ready early?" Lu Yi nodded slowly and said, "Well, February 2nd, the dragon will raise its head. It's already past February 2nd, and it's time for the dragon to raise its head." Wang Jinyuan laughed and said, "Jinren Lu, you have endured for more than 10 years, and you have accumulated a lot of experience. I think you will regain your power in the future. Congratulations." Lu Yi didn't say anything. He just snorted and walked out. After he got out of the door, he paused, as if he wanted to look back, but he didn't. He just walked straight out of the door. Wang Jinyuan looked back at Yu Tian, who was a little confused, and said with a smile, "Jinren Yu, you stay here for the next few days. Jinren Lu and I will go out to do something. If everything goes well, I think you will be able to get your revenge in these days." Yu Tian immediately became excited and said, "Jinren Yu, are you going to go out and take revenge for me?" Wang Jinyuan said with a smile, "Yes, but also no. However, there is some connection after all. Jinren Yu, don't worry. I will definitely not let you be wronged." Only then did Yu Tian feel relieved. He watched Wang Jinyuan go out of the door. Mainyang, who was not far away, suddenly quickened her steps and rushed to the door. She leaned against the door and watched Lu Ye's figure disappear into the antique bluestone street. Yu Tian also stood at the door and watched them leave. Suddenly, he muttered in a low voice. Why do I feel that their departure is a little strange? Mei Yang smiled slightly and remained silent. She never asked about Lu Ye's identity, nor did she ask about his affairs. She just silently accompanied him and waited for him to come back every time. She didn't know what Lu Yi was going to do, nor did she know how long he would be gone. The only thing she knew was that it would be of no use even if she asked more. If he wanted to come back, he would naturally come back. All she needed to do was wait here patiently. After Lu Yi and Wang Jinyuan left, in the depths of the alley, a middle-aged monk in a yellow robe also watched them from afar. The monk turned his head and said to an old monk beside him, Master, he has left. Should we take action? This old monk was none other than Purin, the abbot of Shiyuan Temple. Purin chanted the name of Buddha in a low voice and said, Amitabha, the devil has finally appeared. Let's follow him. It seems that this time, the dagger will be revealed. I don't know how many people will die this time. Alas, people will be plunged into misery and suffering. This middle-aged monk was Feikong, who had fought with Li Yunyang before. Feikong's expression was grim. He said in a deep voice, we cultivate not only to transcend and become Buddhas, or to save all living beings, but also to subdue demons and enforce justice on behalf of heaven. Even if we die in the last battle, I think Buddha will smile happily and lead us to the Western paradise. Purin knew that he was being optimistic. When fighting with the top masters of the Fox Zen sect, the most terrifying thing was that they had a strong armor-piercing ability. When the seven-tailed fox god showed his true body, if he bit a cultivator to death with one bite, his body would be destroyed, but his yang spirit would still not be able to escape. When the 6 major sects besieged the Fox Zen sect, Yi Yu had killed many cultivators in this way. The 8-tailed earth fox and the 9-tailed celestial fox were even more exaggerated. They were born with a strong armor-piercing ability. The yang spirit of the cultivators killed by them would also be greatly injured, and it would be difficult for them to gather. Even when they reached the realm of the mystical silver fox, a pair of hands could be compared to the supreme divine weapons in the hands of ordinary people. When they chopped people, it would be like Takahashi Shota's Amitabha righteous saber. Not only would their bodies be destroyed, but their yang spirit would also be shattered. It was really terrifying to the extreme. It was terrifying to think about fighting against such a demon. Purin's heart was heavy. He didn't know how many of the monks in Shiyuan Temple, Jinshan Temple, and the others, who had been preparing for many years, would be able to return to their homeland. After Feikong finished speaking, his eyes fell on Mei Yang, who was looking at them in the distance. He suddenly said, Master, should we arrest her? He glanced at Purin tentatively, implying that he would use this woman to threaten Lu Yi. Purin put his palms together and said slowly, Amitabha, she is just a poor woman. Let her go. Feikong didn't take it seriously, but he still lowered his head and said, Yes, Abbot. Purin took a deep look at him and said, Let's go. Your brothers are waiting. Our old friends are also waiting for us. After that, the two of them, one after the other, quickly disappeared in the streets of Shantang's 7 miles. At this time, almost all the masters of the cultivation sects in the mainland of China had come out. The heroes of Nazuno in Takagi Prefecture, Japan, had gathered. Chapter 844. 2 days later, Nishino in Japan had become very lively. It was the first time that so many cultivation masters had gathered in this place since the earth-shattering war against the demons 900 years ago. Although the Japanese cultivation world had repeatedly kept a low profile and concealed it, with so many cultivators rushing to the same place, the common people might not be aware of it, but it was absolutely impossible for the high-level officials not to notice it. Later, the high-level officials secretly issued an unprecedentedly strict gag order and martial law. But even so, it could not stop many journalists. Some reporters from the Blackwood County TV station and NHK were squatting near Nishino, but they could not get close to the Killing Stone scenic area. As long as they were nearby, someone would come up to interrogate them. Those who could not show their ID were taken away, and those who had a reporter's ID were even taken away. Nishino had become a place where even a fly could not fly into. Because they did not know what had happened in the Killing Stone scenic area, the Japanese cultivation world and the political circles had reached an agreement and decided to release the news that they were besieging a fugitive murderer. Although the news was questioned by countless reporters and hosts of the TV station the moment it was released, Nishino's defense increased. The lie was repeated 1,000 times, and it became the truth. Slowly, the whole country of Japan took it as the truth, and they began to guess who the murderer was and why he could make such a big noise. Recently, a fugitive murderer who had shaken the whole country of Japan was a man named Ikebashi Tatsuya. After he killed a British teacher in 2007, he changed his appearance and fled. Japan used the national police force to find him, but they could not find him. Later, Ikebashi Tatsuya published a book, which detailed how he changed his appearance and how he escaped. After the book was published, it was very popular and caused a sensation in Japan. However, people did not know what kind of sensation this murderer would cause compared to Ikebashi Tatsuya. The areas around Blackwood County of Japan were all talking about this topic, but they did not know that the person in Nishino was a big devil who had made the cultivation world tremble. Early in the morning, the Japanese cultivators who were resting on the mountains around the Killing Stone scenic area woke up early. These days, more and more Japanese cultivators came here, ready to fight to the death with the mystical silver fox. At this time, there were as many as dozens of cultivators from different sects gathered in the Killing Stone scenic area. Many of them came early and came alone. When they were tired, they sat cross-legged under the tree and rested for a while. Some cultivators who came later brought their families. Not only did they bring the disciples of different generations in the sect, but they also brought tents, futons and other items. At the foot of the mountain, there was a row of tents, which looked like a green line from a distance. With a large number of sects, it was inevitable that there would be complicated influences. With complicated influences, there would inevitably be conflicts. As the saying goes, where there are people, there will be jianghu, and where there is jianghu, there will be conflicts. This sentence had been true since ancient times, and it was not restricted by whether it was in China or not. The whole country of Japan was religious, so there were many sections. Among them, Shintoism had several major schools. The most powerful sect was Ise Shinto, which was founded in the 14th century AD by the Ise Grand Shrine's outer temple officials. The second was Yoshida Shinto, which was founded in the 15th century AD by the Yoshida Shrine officials of Kyoto's Yoshida Kanetsu. The inheritance of Ise Shinto had undergone great changes so far. Although in the beginning, Ise Shinto was established to oppose the attachment of Shintoism to Buddhism, Taoism and Confucianism, it had multiplied to this day. Ise Chuyun and Ise Shenko, the heirs of Ise Shinto, were not only powerful masters of Shintoism, but also outstanding scholars of Buddhism, Confucianism and even Taoism culture. Therefore, the Ise Shinto was a sect of cultivation that was relatively friendly to Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. Yoshida Shinto, on the other hand, was the most famous stubborn sect in the Japanese cultivation world. They stubbornly clung to the doctrine of oneness advocated by the founder of Yoshida Shinto, Yoshida Kanji. They believed that Shintoism was the only one in the world, and the others were illusory and hypocritical doctrines. Therefore, Yoshida Shinto was also known as the One Shinto. Most of the cultivators who believed in such an idea were either paranoid or crazy. The better ones were also stubborn antiques. Among them, the priest of Yoshida Shinto, Yoshida Shinmura, was a typical believer of the only one. The so-called oneness meant that Shintoism was the only good thing in the world, and the others were bad. Japan was the best in the world, and the other countries were bad. Such a doctrine seemed absurd, but in fact, it catered to many right-wing elements and nationalists in Japan, and the sect was quite powerful. Because he did not participate in the battle at the first time, Yoshida Shinto arrived almost at the last moment. As soon as he appeared, Sei suddenly became lively. Everyone saw that there were many believers in front and behind Yoshida Shinmura opening the way. The believers in front had red headscarves on their heads and wore white short robes. Although it was winter, their clothes were a little thin. However, these people were all red in the face and extremely excited. They were leading the way carrying a huge Yoshida Shrine's deity. Yoshida Shrine could be said to be one of the largest shrines in Japan. During the period of the Emperor of Civilization, Yoshida Kanji founded Yoshida Shinto was once the most powerful sect in Shintoism. The scale of the shrine was so large that it was rare in the world. The shrine worshipped and enshrined 3,032 inner gods. It could even be said that worshipping the Yoshida Shrine was like worshipping all the gods in Japan. Every year, at the beginning of the second month of the Gregorian calendar, the Yoshida Shrine would hold a large-scale ceremony. Many believers from all over the country would come to participate. The reason why Yoshida Shinto was delayed was because the Yoshida Shrine was holding such a ceremony. However, after the ceremony, he received news from Suyi. This conceited old man waved his hands and led his subordinates towards Suyi. When the people on Mount Shuya looked over, they saw a group of people slowly moving along the stone path, like rolling dragons in the rain. Although the weather was somewhat dark, they could still clearly see the statues of gods on their shoulders. There were over 3,000 statues in the Yoshida Shrine. It was obviously impossible to move all of them. However, when the crowd looked over, they saw 3 people carrying a dozen statues, and 5 people carrying a dozen statues. It was a huge crowd, and it was bustling with noise and excitement. Yoshida Shinmura himself sat on a wooden platform, wearing a tall hat and a long robe. He was dressed like a priest. His face was covered with white powder and his forehead was red. He held a string of silver bells in one hand and a beautifully painted folding fan in the other. His entire body exuded an indescribable sense of nobility. He looked down at the people below the platform with a trace of contempt and disdain in his eyes. When the Ise Shindo's Chumo and Shinko saw him, they exchanged looks. Very quickly, Ise Shinko scratched his messy hair and said, "Ayaya, the situation has become difficult. This fellow still came in the end. I thought he wouldn't come." Ise Chumo laughed coldly, "I hope he doesn't come. He only knows how to put on airs, how much ability can he have?" Kaisai Hikariuni also stood up and said softly, "You can't say that. On account of the enemy, we should be united. Furthermore, although Yoshida-sama has a strange temper and is a little arrogant, he is still strong." Ise Chumo only laughed coldly and turned his head away, refusing to look at Yoshida Shinto. Ise Shinko shook his head and sighed. While they were talking, Yoshida Shinto had already arrived at the top of the mountain with his followers. As soon as he arrived, he shouted at Ise Shinko, Kaisai Hikariuni, and the others, "Gentlemen, what's the matter with these people?" As he said this, he pointed to the opposite side of the mountain range. At this time, many cultivators in the Chinese cultivation world had also put aside their prejudices and national grievances and rushed to Susumu. Although Ise Shinko, Kaisai Hikariuni, and the others treated them with courtesy, there were dozens of Japanese cultivation sects in Susumu, and there were as many as thousands of cultivators. Naturally, not everyone had a good impression of the Chinese cultivators, even if they were here to help. Therefore, the cultivators of the Chinese sect of cultivation were also keenly aware of this. They chose to stay far away from these Japanese, and most of them stayed on the opposite side of the mountain range, forming a clear separation and minding their own business. Yoshida Shinto was obviously extremely dissatisfied with the decision of Ise Shinko, Kaisai Hikariuni, and the others. It was not only because of Yoshida Shinto's unique theory, but more importantly, how could Yoshida Shinto not participate in such an important decision? Ise Shinko looked at Yoshida Shinto and scolded him in his heart, "You old bastard. You didn't come to Mount Koya and Mount Longhu before. Now that you can't avoid it, you've come to question our decision. You're really hateful." But thinking about it, Ise Shinko still said politely, "Mr. Yoshida, this is the result of our discussion. It's not enough to rely on the strength of the Japanese cultivation world to fight against the mystical silver fox. At this time, it's a good time to give up the views of sects and countries, Mr. Yoshida. Yoshida Shinto raised his head and laughed. Who said that? Look at my believers. The power of their pious faith will be the strongest weapon for us to defeat the mystical silver fox. As he spoke, he turned around and raised his arm to his believers, shaking the silver bell in his hand vigorously. In an instant, his believers all shouted fanatically. There was a strange light in their eyes, as if they would not blink even if they jumped into the sea of fire the next second. Yoshida Shinto laughed and said, "How is it? This kind of support and faith is truly indestructible, my lords. Who can compare with the only faith of Yoshida Shinto? Look at those Chinas. They are hiding far away like quails. They might as well dig a hole and bury themselves. Humph, in front of the enemy, there is no movement at all. I think they are already scared out of their wits." Ise Shinko and Kaisai Hikaryuni looked at each other and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Just as they were about to speak, they suddenly saw another group of people coming from the stone road of the Stone of Slaughter. Although the number of people in this group was not as large as the believers of Yoshida Shinto, their voices were neat and their shouts were earth-shattering, which was quite imposing. For a moment, the people on the mountain were curious. They didn't know where such a group of people had come from. The slogans were so loud that they were shouting. They listened curiously and saw them shouting, "Five Flowers Palm Sect, Supernatural Power, I am the only one in the world." It was Ding Nan, the leader of the Yin and Yang sect of Mount Wuhua. At this moment, the two Palm sect members who loved to put on airs gathered together. Suddenly, Suyi became incomparably lively. When Yoshida Shinto, who was on the mountain, saw this, his face immediately darkened. His believers were also sensible and shouted at the top of their lungs. When Ding Nan's subordinates saw this, they thought, "Oh, there are Japanese people on the mountain who are challenging us? We may not be able to beat you in a fight of magic power, but we are not human when it comes to shouting loudly." Therefore, the believers of Mount Wuhua all shouted at the top of their lungs. Their voices were heart-wrenching, and their momentum was not inferior to that of others. The cultivators of various sects on the mountain all laughed in horror. They were all speechless and looked at the strange scene on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain with their mouths agape. It's a little late. Don't wait. Let's get up and watch it in the morning. Chapter 845. The older people in high positions were, the more they liked to put on airs. People like Yoshida Shinmura were one of them. He had long been dissatisfied with Kaisai Hikaryuni and Ise Shinkuan's request for help from the Chinese cultivation world. He had secretly scolded the two of them for being traitors to the Japanese cultivation world. He had even angrily denounced the Chinese cultivators as robbers who took advantage of the burning house, saying that each of them had bad intentions and were despicable Chinese pigs. Along the way, it was not easy for him to hold back from cursing in front of Ise Shinkuan, Kaisai Hikaryuni, and the others. It could be considered as giving them face. Who would have thought that at this moment, he would encounter someone who was trying to put on airs with him? If he could tolerate it, what could he not? If a person who was usually the most ostentatious met another person who was also ostentatious, then it was simply like a cat smelling fish. If they didn't compare and fight, then it would be more painful than killing them. Yoshida Shinmura was enraged by the behavior of the Wuhua Mountain sect, but he was old, so he could still hide his anger. When his face darkened, the two deep lines on his cheeks revealed a sense of majesty and anger. As the saying goes, the kind of general, the kind of soldiers. It was the same for the cultivation sections. Like the master, like the disciple. When Yoshida Shinmura became angry, his men became more and more frightened, and their shouts became louder. Ding Nan of the Wuhua Mountain sect was a person who would not lose even if she lost. Although she did not understand Japanese, she could hear the strong provocation in the other party's tone and voice. Ding Nan raised her eyebrows, and a trace of ridicule flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Song Guohua, who was beside her, was extremely adept at reading people. When he saw the movement of Ding Nan's eyebrows, he immediately understood her meaning. He immediately led his subordinates to shout themselves hoarse as they fought on the mountain once more. Their battle was like a battle on top of a mountain, with shouts ringing out. Neither side knew what the other was shouting, and in the end, their voices were so loud that they didn't even know what they were shouting. They only knew that they had to overwhelm the other with their voices, or else they would lose face and dignity. All the sects in the Japanese cultivation world looked at each other. They wanted to dissuade him, but they did not know what to say to the stubborn old man. Meanwhile, the Chinese cultivators on the other side of the mountain also did not know whether to laugh or cry. An old man of the Chuanjian dragon sect with white eyebrows and a beard spoke in Shandong dialect. He asked Du Fei with a puzzled expression, "Little Du, which sect is that at the foot of the mountain? Why haven't I seen this sect before? What are they shouting about?" This old man was a senior member of Chuanjian dragon sect. His name was Zhou Fachang, and his Taoist title was Yuan Yangzhenren. He was a little older than Zhang Zhishuan. In the sect, even the leader of dragon sect had to greet him respectfully. As soon as he asked this question, Du Fei, who was in charge of almost all the external affairs of Chuanjian dragon sect and had great power, had to bow respectfully and say, "Grandmaster, this is the Yin Yang sect of Mount Wuhua." Zhou Fachang could not help but feel surprised. He reached out and pulled his beard, looking as if he had seen a ghost. "The leader of their sect is Zheng Yuan, isn't it?" Zheng Yuan didn't do this before. Zhou Fachang was already very old and much older than Zhang Zhishuan. He was now 138 years old. Although Zheng Yuan was also an old man in his 50s or 60s, when he stood in front of Zhou Fachang, he really looked like a tender baby. There were two thunder tribulations in Chuanjian dragon sect. One was the leader of Chuanjian dragon sect, and the other was the only remaining senior member, Zhou Fachang. At present, they were here to conquer the mystical silver fox. Because they were abroad, it was not suitable for the leader of Chuanjian dragon sect to come. Moreover, Chuanjian dragon sect was a very powerful sect in China. Once the leader of Chuanjian dragon sect moved, it would be very eye-catching. It was difficult for him to keep a low profile. As soon as Zhou Fachang arrived, with his seniority in cultivation, the cultivators of all sects in China all greeted him with courtesy. They faintly respected him and obeyed his orders. At this time, there were also cultivation sects such as the Maoshan sect next to Du Fei. Although the Chinese cultivators fought fiercely behind closed doors, they were quite able to unite when they went out of the country. At least on the surface, they were harmonious. Although the northern and southern Taoism sects were at odds with each other, Maui Chang of the Maoshan sect was also very respectful of Zhou Fachang. At this time, when she heard his words, she took the initiative to say, "Senior Zhou, you don't know this. Zheng Yuan died a long time ago, and now his disciple succeeded him." Zhou Fachang couldn't help but be stunned. He had been in seclusion for more than 10 years, so he didn't know that the outside world had undergone great changes. At this time, he couldn't help but sigh. "Alas, I said that this boy had evil intentions. If he didn't take the right path, I'm afraid he wouldn't end up well. Now it seems that it's true." Alas, the Yin Yang sect of Mount Wuhua was at least like a sect in his hands. Now it has fallen into the hands of these ignorant children. It's really improper and outrageous. Most of the old people were more traditional. Seeing that the noise at the foot of the mountain was really outrageous, Zhou Fachang couldn't stand it anymore. He turned to Du Fei and said, "Little Du, hurry down and tell them to stop quarreling." "What are they doing?" "They're not shouting at the market. They've disgraced themselves in country art, don't they feel ashamed?" Du Fei also had the same intention. After responding, he immediately leaped up and came in front of Ding Nan and the others, trying to persuade them in every possible way. Although Ding Nan was stubborn and hot-tempered, she was not an unreasonable person. Originally, she just wanted to fight with these Japanese, and she had no other intentions. Moreover, at this time, her subordinates were few in number. After shouting for a while, their throats were sore, like broken gongs, and their voices were hoarse and unpleasant. Their momentum was greatly weakened. At this time, when she heard Du Fei say so, she took the opportunity to roll on the slope and quit while she was ahead. However, she still had to say some polite words. Ding Nan said to Du Fei, "Jinren Du, I stopped because of the Chuanjin dragon sect, not because I'm afraid of these Japanese." Du Fei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Seeing that the beautiful and tall Mount Wuhua sect in front of him was so proud, he said repeatedly, "Yes, yes, sect leader LV is young and promising. Of course, I won't lower myself to the same level as these Japanese." When Ding Nan heard him call her sect leader LV, she knew that the cultivation world still regarded her as Zheng Yuan's disciple, LV Fengping. Her face didn't change. She smiled slightly and said, "Jinren Du, let's go." Du Fei led her to the top of the mountain where the Chinese cultivators were gathered. As soon as they reached the top of the mountain, she saw an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion standing in the middle of the crowd. He was looking at her with a pair of bright eyes. When her eyes met the old man's, her heart immediately skipped a beat, as if she had been hammered by someone. The shock made her a little restless. After Ding Nan's cultivation had been successful, she had become extremely conceited. She really had the impression of looking down on the world and the cultivators in the world. At this time, when she met Zhou Fachang, she was immediately shocked by his ordinary gaze. This made her feel very shocked and she thought, who is this person? How can he be so powerful? I wonder who is more powerful, Li Yundong or him? Ding Nan cultivated the yin and yang qi of heaven and earth, so her aura was integrated with everything in the world. It was difficult to detect the strength of her aura. Zhou Fachang couldn't see it from afar. He only felt that this little girl was acting recklessly and losing the face of the Chinese cultivation world for the sake of showing off. He wanted to give her a show of strength, but when he tested her, he found that Ding Nan's eyes were not only sharp, but also not at a disadvantage under his stare. She even seemed to be fighting back. Zhou Fachang was shocked. He hurriedly stepped forward and couldn't help asking, "What's your name? Is your master Zheng Yuan?" At this time, Du Fei was also introducing Zhou Fachang's identity and origin to Ding Nan in a low voice. Ding Nan's heart skipped a beat. She bowed to Zhou Fachang and said, "I'm the sect leader of the Yin and Yang sect of Mount Wuhua. Nice to meet you, Senior Zhou." Ding Nan was very cunning. She wanted to recover her real name one day and hold her head high. Therefore, she deliberately hid her name so as not to leave something to talk about in the future. Zhou Fachang didn't know what she was thinking. He just stared at her with wide eyes and an incredulous look on his face. "Little girl, how old are you? Are you really Zheng Yuan's disciple?" Ding Nan smiled slightly and said, "Senior Zhou, I just turned 20. Zheng Yuan is indeed my master." According to the habits and etiquette of cultivators, it was extremely impolite to call one's master by his name on such a formal occasion. Although some of the cultivators nearby frowned secretly, they didn't delve into this detail because it was unusual. Zhou Fachang's cultivation was extremely high, and he only had eyes for all things in the world. Naturally, he would not pay attention to the little thoughts of these people in the ghost domain. He pulled his beard hard and sighed, "Amazing, really amazing. At such a young age, he has already cultivated to the Jinshin phase. It's really commendable." Maui Chang, who was standing to one side, couldn't help but say unhappily, "What's so special about that?" Zhou Fachang looked back at her and shook his head. "You are an inner disciple, and you have been indoctrinated since you were a child. The little girl in front of you obviously became a monk halfway through. The difference in cultivation conditions is like heaven and earth. How can you compare?" Maui Chang was proud and arrogant. Even though she had suffered a setback in Mount Longhu, she had only fought with her opponent and had not hurt her self-confidence. When she heard Zhou Fachang's words in public, she suddenly blushed and looked at Ding Nan angrily. "Why can't I compare? I don't believe that a monk halfway through becoming a monk can be better than me. As the saying goes, different elements attract, similar elements repel. Wanting two proud and arrogant, beautiful and powerful women to peacefully coexist together, that is as difficult as ascending to heaven. Ding Nan had been with Zhou Qin for a long time, and she had always been suppressed by her to the point of feeling inferior. At this time, when she turned over, this inferiority complex had turned into conceit and even arrogance, so that she was also a person who couldn't stand it. Ding Nan suddenly raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "I'm a monk halfway through, of course, I can't compare with this righteous younger sister. However, it's easy to say who is stronger and who is weaker. Won't you know after a fight?" Her words were like throwing a fire into a pot of oil, immediately arousing Mao Yichang's arrogance. She immediately jumped out and sneered. "Well, today, let me have a taste of the yin and yang sects of Mount Wuhua." At this time, the cultivators of all sects in the Chinese cultivation world were in a panic. What was going on? The mystical silver fox hadn't made a move yet, and they were going to fight among themselves? No way. At this time, in the hotel near the Killing Stone scenic area, the mystical silver fox was lying leisurely under the eaves of the wooden corridor and sleeping. At this time, it was raining heavily. The rain fell on the roof of the black-tiled house, flowed down the slope, and gathered in the groove of the eaves. It was like a row of pearls that kept falling, which was very beautiful. The mystical silver fox was lying behind the bead curtain, resting lazily. Lu Feier, who was beside her, covered her ears and said to the mystical silver fox with a grimace, "Senior mystical silver fox, it's so noisy. How can you fall asleep?" Although Ding Nan's side had already left, the cultivators of Yoshida Shinto were obviously unwilling to rest. They were still shouting and shouting. Their voices were so loud that Lu Feier, who was at the foot of the mountain, couldn't bear it. However, the mystical silver fox didn't even raise her eyelids. A faint smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. "It's just a group of wild dogs barking wildly. Why bother with them?" Lu Feier's ears were bombarded by these people, and she felt her heart beating fast. She couldn't help saying, "But, aren't you the mystical silver fox? How can you let them be so presumptuous in front of you?" When the mystical silver fox heard this, she opened her eyes slightly and turned her head to look at the mountain range behind her. Then she said slowly, "Not all the people are here yet. Don't worry. Wait until they are all here." At this time, Siyi had gathered nearly 1,500 people in the cultivation world of China. Among them, the lowest cultivation quotient was a young spirit master. In front of such a large group of cultivators, ordinary people would be scared to the point that their feet would go soft. However, the mystical silver fox treated them as if they were nothing. It seemed that as long as she made a move, these people would immediately turn into ashes. But she had confidence, but Lu Feier didn't. She had seen these people slowly increase in the past 2 days. The mystical silver fox could win against 10 or 100, but what about 1,000? Lu Feier complained in her heart. She didn't know how to persuade her. But at this time, she heard an earth-shattering cry coming from the mountain. It was a burst of Japanese. She didn't understand these Japanese, but the mystical silver fox had been lurking beside the Emperor of Bird Feather for many years. Her Japanese was more fluent than many Japanese. She heard these words clearly. The voice was shouting, "The mystical silver fox is ugly, in name but not in reality. She is as timid as a mouse." When the mystical silver fox heard this, she immediately flew into a rage. She sat up with a rub and raised her eyebrows. She shouted, "Dongying's clowns, do you think that I, the mystical silver fox, really can't kill people?" After that, his figure flashed and he rushed to the mountain with a murderous look. I thought that I could only write 1 chapter today. I still wrote 2 chapters. I'm so tired. I crawled to sleep. Chapter 846. While the Chinese cultivation world was having internal strife, the Japanese cultivation world was also on the verge of internal strife. The relationship between the sects in the Japanese cultivation world was more complicated than that of the Chinese cultivation world. Many sects could not coexist with each other. It could even be said that the cultivators of the two sects could not exist on the same planet at the same time. Once they met, something would definitely happen. Yoshida Shinmura's domineering attitude made many Japanese cultivators very dissatisfied. Although Yoshida Shinto was quite powerful, there were also many powerful sects in Shinto. Among them, Yoshikawa Shinto and Suka Shinto were famous Shinto sects in Japan. These two major Shinto sects were deeply influenced by Zhu Shi's Neo-Confucianism in the Song dynasty. The founder of Yoshikawa Shinto, Yoshikawa Ueji, first studied under Ise Shinto, then under Yoshida Shinto. Finally, he absorbed Zhu Shi's Neo-Confucianism and founded Yoshikawa Shinto. Therefore, it was also called Neo-Confucianism Shinto. Another Shinto sect that was also influenced by Zhu Shi's Neo-Confucianism was similar to Yoshikawa Shinto. The founder, Yamazaki Saito, first became a monk, then returned to the secular world and became a Confucian. Like Yoshikawa Yuzu, he studied under Ise Shinto and Yoshida Shinto. Finally, he absorbed the ideas of Zhu Shi's Neo-Confucianism and founded Shinto. Both sects preached that the way of the monarch and his subjects is unchangeable, respect the emperor, loyalty to the monarch, and righteousness. Although Japan pulled the emperor down from the altar after World War II, MacArthur did not completely tear off the emperor's mask in Japan. Therefore, the emperor was still a godlike existence in the eyes of many people in Japan. As a result, both sects had quite a large market and power in Japan. Although these two Shinto sects advocated Confucianism in the early days of the world's creation, it would be a big mistake to say that they were pro-China. These two sects had long evolved into extreme religions that advocated the divine right of the monarch, the Japanese divine kingdom, and other doctrines. Most of the cultivators were right-wingers and worshippers of the emperor. Their sect's priests, Masao Yoshikawa and Ryuichi Yamazaki, were the same as Yoshida Shinmura. They were all religious. However, what made them disgusted was not Yoshida Shinmura's attitude towards the Chinese cultivators, but the way Yoshida Shinmura spoke as if he was the boss. Masao Yoshikawa was a shriveled old man. He was extremely short, only about 1.5 m tall. Adding on his age, he looked like a dwarf. He raised his head, and looked at the stage with an unfriendly gaze. He spoke in a strange tone, Yoshida-kun, since when did you have the right to speak here? Yamazaki Ryuichi also had a dark expression as he spoke. What an imposing manner. Is the Yoshida Shinto only left with this display? The two of them represented an extremely large power in the Japanese Shinto. If they were to speak with one another, even Ise Shingguang and Ise Izumo would not dare to look down on them. However, Yoshida Shinmura glanced at them condescendingly, and threw his head back and laughed. Little brats, Yoshida Shinto and Chuka Shinto dare to be presumptuous in front of our Yoshida Shinto. 300 years ago, the founder of your sect was still a student of our Yoshida Shinto sect. As he spoke, he looked around and laughed loudly. His expression was disdainful and insufferably arrogant. The sect placed great importance on the relationship between master and disciple. It could be said that a teacher for a day is a father for life. In a sect like the Shinto that was extremely particular about ethics, the relationship between master and disciple was extremely important. It could be said that no matter how good your disciple was in the future, no matter how bad your master was, when they met, even if the master became your immediate superior, you would still have to respectfully kneel and kowtow. Such a relationship in Japan was equivalent to a relationship that could never be overturned. How could the descendants of the Yoshida faction and Chuka faction not be depressed? The Yoshida faction was once the teacher of the Yoshida faction and Chuka faction. Although this was a matter of 300 years ago, no matter how ancient it was still recorded in the history books of Japan. No one could change it. And this matter had always been the most taboo matter for the Yoshida faction and Chuka faction. If the great priest of the Yoshida faction was a great cultivator of virtue and prestige, it was not that they could not respectfully prostrate themselves. But with the face of Yoshida Shinmura, prostrate themselves on the ground and kowtow to him? Pay. They might as well commit seppuku. Because of this, everyone was aware of this point. But everyone was very careful to avoid this matter, and did their best not to provoke them. But when Yoshida Shinmura brought up this matter in front of everyone, Yamazaki Ryuichi and Yoshida Masao simultaneously flew into a rage. They spared no effort to drag Yoshida Shinmura down from the high platform. When the two of them moved, the entire mountain peak faintly trembled. Yoshida Shinmura was also somewhat flustered. He shrunk back and immediately said, "What are you guys doing? Did I say something wrong?" Yamazaki Ryuichi and Yoshida Masao became increasingly furious. They were so angry that they blew their beards and glared at him. "Baka, if you say such words in private, then so be it. But you say such words in front of us in front of so many people. How do you expect us priests to behave? Aren't you trying to trick us into fighting you? What a fool." When the cultivators of the other sects saw that the three of them were about to fight because of a disagreement, the followers of the respective sects of the three sects also began to clamor. The sounds of cursing and roaring resounded through the sky on the mountain range. It was really livelier than before. They all felt a headache. Ise Chuyun sneered with extreme disdain, and Ise Shenko also had a rare wry smile on his face. He hurriedly advised, "Everyone, listen to me, listen to me. At present, not only is there a strong enemy like the mystical silver fox eyeing us covetously, but there are also Chinese cultivators watching us from the opposite side. We can't lose face in front of the Chinese people. Do you want the Chinese to laugh at us for not knowing etiquette?" Although Ise Chuyun was unruly, his cultivation and wisdom were famous in the Japanese cultivation world, and he was quite respected. As soon as he spoke, Yoshida Masao and Yamazaki Ryuichi also took the opportunity to step down and said angrily, "Ise-kun, it's not that we don't know etiquette, but some people have gone too far." Humph. As they spoke, the two of them flicked their sleeves and walked into the depths of the crowd, as if they were disdainful of being associated with Yoshida Shinmura. Yoshida Shinmura looked at their backs as they left. He didn't feel that they were giving in at all. Instead, he felt that they were admitting defeat. Yoshida Shinmura became more and more complacent. He smiled disdainfully and said, "A group of cowards. They came so early, but they didn't dare to challenge the mystical silver fox. They shouted so hard at their former masters." Humph. As he spoke, he looked around, as if he wanted to find those who wanted to make things difficult for him. However, his behavior was simply not like that of a normal person. In front of a great enemy, he still had the mood to fight with others. Others all regarded him as a lunatic. How could they be willing to pay attention to him? When Yoshida Shinmura saw that everyone was avoiding his eyes, he thought that he had convinced them with his virtue. He couldn't help but wave his fan proudly and say to his followers, "Everyone, let's let everyone see the power of our Yoshida Shinto." As he spoke, he waved his hand, pointed the silver bell in his hand to the foot of the mountain, and shouted, "The mystical silver fox is ugly, in name only, and as timid as a mouse." When the people around heard this, they were all shocked. Those who had fought with the mystical silver fox before wanted to rush over and cover his mouth. However, at this time, Yoshida Shinmura's subordinates all shouted at the foot of the mountain in unison. Their voices were uniform and shook heaven and earth. The cultivators of all the sects in Japan all looked pale and trembled all over. Especially Ise Shinguang, his face was livid. They had fought with the mystical silver fox. Naturally, they knew that in order to deal with a master like the mystical silver fox, there must be a top master at the front to slow her down. Otherwise, there would be no chance of winning. The mystical silver fox's spiritual power cultivation was far beyond ordinary people's imagination. Such a quality advantage was far from being offset by the quantity advantage. Before that, Tachibana Wakako and Abe Naoto had also called to tell them that they had successfully invited Wang Yuanshan. Therefore, they had been waiting for Wang Yuanshan's arrival these days. As soon as he arrived, they would besiege the mystical silver fox. However, Yoshida Shinmura's whim suddenly put their preparations in danger of collapse. When Yoshida Shinmura saw that everyone was like petrified wax, he thought that they were shocked by his momentum. He laughed proudly, waved the folding fan in his hand, pointed to a lush green pine on the top of the mountain, and said, "Everyone, let's go there to rest. Later, watch me fight with the mystical silver fox." This pine tree was extremely dense. Even in a thunderstorm, there was almost no rain. It was an excellent place to hide from the rain. Moreover, this place had a wide field of view, and one could almost see everything around them. Therefore, Yoshida Shinmura took over the nest the moment he arrived. He didn't care if there were people there. He directly ordered his subordinates to carry him over. Yoshida Shinmura saw that his men were cursing, but he didn't see any reaction from the mystical silver fox. At this time, the masters of all the major sects in Japan had gathered here for a few days, but there was no movement. As soon as he arrived, he suppressed the mystical silver fox, which made him extremely proud. He sat under the pine tree, fanning himself as he looked around. He was truly immensely proud of himself. But just when he was complacent, a figure suddenly flew out from the foot of the mountain and appeared in front of the mountain in an instant. Although this person was slim and exquisite, the 7 golden foxtails dancing wildly behind her immediately scared the people on the mountain and made them shout, "Mystical silver fox! It's the mystical silver fox!" All of a sudden, there was a commotion on the mountain. The cultivators of all the sects in Japan were as if they were facing a formidable enemy. All of them were extremely nervous. Yoshida Shinmura's whole body shook, and then his whole body tensed up. Although he was arrogant, he was not a complete fool. Since he dared to take the initiative to provoke the mystical silver fox, he must have some strength. Yoshida Shinmura hid one hand in his sleeve and held a string of talismans. They were the Amaterasu Sunbreaking Talisman, Golden Light Evil Talisman, Pure Purification Talisman, and other powerful Shintoism talismans. Moreover, the high platform he was sitting cross-legged on had a hidden magic circle. The reason why he had been doing this and refused to come down from the platform was that he wanted to use his body to cover this mobile magic circle. The strength of this magic circle was that it could double his spiritual power and the power of the talismans in his hand. Although the power of each talisman was amazing, it was not enough to kill the mystical silver fox. But if it was enhanced by the magic circle, it might not be so. Yoshida Shinmura's wishful thinking was not bad. He used the method of control to control the mystical silver fox. He was so nervous that his hands hidden in his sleeves were trembling. He knew that he only had one chance. As long as the mystical silver fox fell into his trap, he would be able to kill the mystical silver fox by himself. This would be a great feat that even Abe Taiko could not do. And he, Yoshida Shinmura, would become the greatest cultivator in the history of Japan and be recorded in history forever. I'm so tired that I can't even open my eyes. There's only one more time today. I'll make up for it tomorrow. Don't wait. Chapter 847. Yoshida Shinmura's plan could be said to be a complete deception. If he met anyone else here, he would probably fall into the trap. At this time, everyone indeed regarded him as a lunatic. Who would have thought that under his arrogant appearance, there was such a sinister intention? However, it was a pity that Yoshida Shinmura's opponent was not an ordinary person. He was facing the mystical silver fox, a big devil who had fought more times than ordinary people had eaten. The mystical silver fox stopped in mid-air with a face full of anger. Just as she was about to pounce on Yoshida Shinmura, she suddenly felt that an extremely terrible danger seemed to be coming at her. This was the unique feeling of a cultivator who had reached the top level of cultivation. Sometimes an ordinary person could be alert to the coming crisis, let alone some people who had undergone special cultivation. Shang Yunxiang, the master of Xingyi, had such an ability. Not only could he foresee danger, but when he was sleeping, he would wake up immediately if someone else looked at him. Li Zhongshuan, the author of the book, The Past Martial Arts World, had once cultivated under Shang Yunxiang's door. When he heard that he had this strange ability, he didn't believe it. He had tried it himself. When he passed by the door of his room, he quickly took a look at Shang Yunxiang, who was taking a nap. At this time, Shang Yunxiang, who had his back to Li Zhongshuan, immediately woke up. Li Zhongshuan was extremely shocked after that and felt that it was incredible. After asking Shang Yunxiang said casually, "We practice Kung Fu, and we practice this kind of ability." The martial arts world was the closest to the cultivation world. Sun Lutang, the former Tiger Head Junior Protector and the world's top master, was the only one who could be compared with him. It was said that Shang Yunxiang was a great master who had comprehended the true meaning and mystery of martial arts. Shang Yunxiang's realm was extremely mysterious. Others could not understand it, but in the hearts of martial arts masters and great cultivators, it was like a mirror. This was a kind of magical and mysterious realm that one had to cultivate to a certain level to feel. What Shang Yunxiang could do, there was no reason that the mystical silver fox, who was one of the most powerful devils in history, could not do it. The mystical silver fox suddenly stopped and looked at Yoshida Shinmura's sleeve. She had rich experience in fighting. She looked at Yoshida Shinmura's lower body and saw that he still dared to sit on the high platform without moving at all. She immediately understood everything. Even a reincarnated wisdom king wouldn't dare to be so arrogant. "You're just a lowly priest of a shrine, yet you dare to be so presumptuous in front of me?" The mystical silver fox couldn't help but sneer in her heart. "How dare you use such a lowly trick on me?" The mystical silver fox quickly came up with a plan to deal with it. While sneering, she quickly pinched her fingers and recited something softly. On the opposite side, Yoshida Shinmura saw that the mystical silver fox was floating in the air without moving at all, which made him even more nervous. He didn't know if the mystical silver fox had seen through his plan, so he shouted again, "Mystical silver fox, do you dare to come forward and fight with me?" The mystical silver fox didn't seem to hear him. She just stood there, pinching her fingers and moving her lips, as if she was doing a spell. This time, Yoshida Shinmura became more and more flustered. If the mystical silver fox didn't come close, he wouldn't dare to release his talisman. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to guarantee the hit rate. Yoshida Shinmura gritted his teeth and pointed at the mystical silver fox on the high platform and scolded her. Seeing that the mystical silver fox didn't respond to such insults, his subordinates also dared to scold her. For a moment, the mountain was filled with filthy words, like water, which was hard to stop. The cultivators of various sects in Japan on the mountain were all dumbfounded. Many of them didn't understand what was going on with the strange scene in front of them. Where did Yoshida Shinmura get the courage to point at the nose of the mystical silver fox and scold her like this? The mystical silver fox had gone up the mountain to kill because of their scolding. Why did it seem that she didn't hear them and didn't move at all? The mystical silver fox had been enraged by a sentence before, but at this time, she was as calm as a rock. She stared at Yoshida Shinmura. Suddenly, her wriggling red lips stopped. She held the 5 thunder fingers in her hand and pointed to the sky. Then she shouted, "Thunder!" Suddenly, a huge whirlpool appeared in the rolling dark clouds in the sky. With a loud crack, a bolt of lightning struck at Yoshida Shinmura in an instant. The skill of attracting thunder was the most powerful and difficult magic in the world. It was easy to attract a powerful bolt of thunder from the sky and accurately hit a person who was tens of thousands of feet above the ground. One could imagine how difficult it was. There were many cultivators who were not careful when attracting thunder, causing a backfire. A bolt of thunder struck them. Therefore, it could be said that the thunder-attracting skill was a spell that could kill 10,000 enemies and hurt 10,000 oneself. Even the mystical silver fox herself did not dare to say that she could accurately hit the target with every bolt of thunder. Therefore, since ancient times, the thunder skill was often a combination of 10,000 bolts of thunder, covering the ground to kill the opponent in seconds. However, at this time, the mystical silver fox had only attracted 1 bolt of thunder. Logically speaking, the hit rate could not be guaranteed, but Yoshida Shinmura was standing under a tall pine tree. Standing under a tree in this thunderous and rainy weather was something that a slightly normal person would not do. However, Yoshida Shinmura had his own difficulties. He could not move his position on the high platform. At this time, it was raining heavily. Although he had used his spiritual power to prevent himself from being wet all the way, he was going to fight with the mystical silver fox. Naturally, he had to save every little bit of spiritual power to deal with the mystical silver fox. Of course, he was unwilling to waste his spiritual power on such a thing as blocking the rain. If he was drenched in the rain like this, the rain would enter his body, and the moisture would also enter his body, which would greatly affect the speed of the qi and blood in his body. Although the cultivation methods of the Chinese and Japanese cultivation worlds were different, the Japanese cultivators also relied on the qi and blood in their bodies to mobilize their spiritual power. Moreover, Yoshida Shinmura, like most Japanese cultivators, only cultivated their minds but not their lives. Naturally, their bodies could not reach the perfect state. The moisture could easily enter their bodies and affect them. Therefore, Yoshida Shinmura hid under the pine tree. Others only thought that he was complacent and courted death by standing under the tree. But only he knew that he was forced to do so. In order to plot against the mystical silver fox, it could be said that he had calculated every step, but he didn't expect that he would be harmed by a tree. With a loud bang, the heavenly thunder steadily struck down at the tree. Yoshida Shinmura was also a rare great cultivator in Japan. He was also sensitive to danger. He subconsciously wanted to dodge, but when he thought about it, he suddenly found that his whole body was numb. He looked down and saw that his whole body was wrapped in golden threads, which made him motionless. He didn't know when the mystical silver fox had done it, but it had entangled him in place. Yoshida Shinmura was horrified. He looked up and saw that the mystical silver fox's red eyes were staring at him ferociously, as if he had been stared at by the god of death. At this time, the cultivators of the various sects subconsciously shouted, "Hide!" The people who were closest to Yoshida Shinmura and had the ability to save him were Ryuichi Yamazaki and Masao Yoshikawa. The cultivation of these two people was not much different from that of Yoshida Shinmura. They were both rare masters in the Japanese cultivation world. However, the two of them had just been so angry with Yoshida Shinmura that their noses were almost crooked. At this time, seeing that he was arrogant and unlucky to die, they were too happy. How could they have the thought of saving him at the first time? When they came to their senses and felt that they should let go of their prejudices to save Yoshida Shinmura, the heavenly thunder had already struck Yoshida Shinmura's body. Everyone saw a white light in front of them, as if a giant bomb had exploded in front of them. A blazing aura rolled over, making them unable to help but close their eyes. When they opened their eyes again, they saw that there was a huge pit in the place where Yoshida Shinmura was. Everything within a diameter of 5 or 6 meters around him had disappeared. Yoshida Shinmura, the pine tree beside him, the high platform under him, and the believers who were carrying the high platform had all been turned into powder. Everyone was stunned. Yoshida Shinto was one of the most famous Shinto sects in Japan. Their great priest, Yoshida Shinmura, had been killed by the mystical silver fox as soon as they met. What a terrible thing this was. For a moment, some courageous cultivators were so scared that their legs trembled and their feces flowed out. However, the other believers of Yoshida Shinto were fanatics selected by Yoshida Shinmura. All of them had some cultivation, and they were not afraid of death. When they saw this scene, they were not afraid to escape at first. Instead, after being stunned for a moment, they jumped up and pounced on the mystical silver fox like crazy, shouting hysterically for revenge. When the mystical silver fox saw them pouncing on her, she couldn't help snorting coldly and laughing angrily. Courting death? Well, I'll fulfill your wish. As she spoke, she moved and rushed into the crowd. In an instant, there was a bloody storm on the mountain ridge. In an instant, these hundreds of people were all killed by the mystical silver fox. Their heads were rolling around on the mountain ridge, and there were broken limbs everywhere. The cultivators of all sects in Japan seemed to be scared silly by the ferocity and cruelty of the mystical silver fox. There was not even a single person who could help. After the mystical silver fox killed the last fanatical disciple of Yoshida Shinto, she glanced at the top of the mountain where the Japanese were gathered. She saw that this group of people were all covered in dust. They were sitting on the mountain and watching the tigers fight. It seemed that they were not going to save them. She suddenly became more and more angry. There were two kinds of people that the mystical silver fox hated the most in her life. One was those who were ungrateful, and the other was those who did not save them. When she was chased by a group of experts led by the reincarnated Wisdom King, she had begged the reincarnated Wisdom King in private, hoping that he would let her go this time for the sake of their love. Unexpectedly, the reincarnated Wisdom King had a heart of stone and killed her. The mystical silver fox harbored a deep hatred in her heart. After she fled to Japan, she hid beside the Emperor of the Bird Feather to recuperate. Originally, she had a close relationship with Yasukin Abe, who often met the Emperor of the Bird Feather. The two of them often made tea and discussed the Tao. Unexpectedly, her identity was discovered by Yasukin Abe in the future. Later, she begged Yasukin Abe not to expose her. As a result, Yasukin Abe did not hesitate to expose her true face to the Emperor of the Bird Feather and led everyone to seal her. The mystical silver fox was so angry that she thought that Yasukin Abe did not save her and that the reincarnated Wisdom King was ungrateful. She swore that as long as she saw these two kinds of people, she would kill them. When the mystical silver fox saw the behavior of the Japanese people, after another round of killing, her heart was full of killing intent. She made up her mind and shouted angrily at the Japanese cultivators, "You are a group of beasts who don't want to save me. Why are you still alive?" With that, she let out a loud cry and plunged into the crowd in an instant. The fuse of Yoshida Shinmura's scheme was completely ignited. At this time, Wang Yuanshan had not arrived yet. Li Yundong, who was far away in Tiannan City, did not know what kind of earth-shattering event had happened to Su Yi. Book. Chapter 848. The cultivators of various sects in Japan did not expect that the mystical silver fox would suddenly kill them, especially the two great priests of Yoshikawa Shinto and Suka Shinto. They did not expect that their momentary distraction would cause the killing intent of the mystical silver fox, which would cause a great disaster. None of them were weak. Any one of them would be a famous figure in the Chinese cultivation world. In particular, the status of the priest in Shintoism was high. It was equivalent to the position of the head of the Chinese cultivation sects, and it was also equivalent to the position of the chief monk of the Shingon Tantrism in Mount Koya. Usually, the cultivators who were qualified to inherit such positions had to cultivate to the realm of God. Although the great priests did not cultivate their lives, build the foundation, or cross the thunder retribution, their strength could not be underestimated. They were equivalent to the thunder retribution masters in the country. Moreover, because their strength came from faith, the difficulty of cultivation was relatively low. It was not uncommon for talented people to have the strength equivalent to the thunder retribution masters at a young age. In the past 100 years, the Chinese mainland had been in turmoil, traditional culture had been destroyed, and there was a serious lack of faith. This had led to the destruction of almost all the cultivation soil and the loss of the cultural soil on which they relied for survival. The cultivation sects could not be replenished with fresh blood. The masters of the Chinese cultivation world were decreasing rapidly at an alarming rate. There were few Jinshin and even fewer thunder retribution masters. On the other hand, although the Japanese cultivation world had also experienced the war, the cultivation soil had not been destroyed. On the contrary, it had become more and more fertile. Up to now, Shintoism had become the #1 sect in Japan, with more than 100 million believers. With the support of such power of faith, in the past 100 years, the Japanese cultivation world had far more masters at the level of Jinshin and thunder retribution than the Chinese cultivation world. However, because their cultivation ideas and methods were like the national environment and national conditions of Japan, there were natural defects and bottlenecks. They could reach a very high level, but they could never reach the top. A powerful master at the level of Thunder Retribution had met the mystical silver fox and died as soon as they met. This would scare the courage of the cultivators in the world. When two people fought with each other, if their level was the same, they would fight for their morale. Whoever had a higher morale would have a greater chance of winning. When two forces fought with each other, no matter whether their level was the same or not, they would always fight for their morale. If their morale fell, it would be difficult for immortals to save them. Even if Buddha was reborn, it would be difficult for him to save them. After a bolt of lightning struck down, the morale of the Japanese cultivators almost fell to the lowest point. Many of the Japanese cultivators here had been frightened by the mystical silver fox before. At this time, seeing that Yoshida Shinmura was killed by the lightning in an instant, they were so shocked that they wanted to turn around and run away. At this time, Ise Shinguang, Ise Izumo, and Kaisai Hikariuni had all played the role of a great cultivator. Without saying a word, Ise Izumo immediately summoned Amaterasu to the mortal world and pounced on the mystical silver fox. Ise Grand Shrine was the highest national shrine in Japan. It was the shrine dedicated to the supreme god of Japan, Amaterasu Great God. Before Masako Tachibana merged with Shinyan Tantrism, the Japanese cultivation world was undoubtedly ruled by the cultivators of Ise Shinto. Although Ise Izumo was known as the number 2 in the Japanese cultivation world, it was because she had been suppressed by Masako Tachibana in the previous fight, which made many Japanese people sigh with emotion. Since Yu was born, how could Liang be born? Ise Shrine was the highest national shrine in Japan. It was a shrine dedicated to the supreme god of Japan, Amaterasu. At this time, she summoned the gods to the world. Everyone saw an extremely dazzling woman standing on the mountain. This woman's whole body was shining. Only from her slim figure and exquisite curves could they tell that she was a woman. Amaterasu was the sun god of Japan and also the god with the highest status. She was holding a sword in her hand. The sword was surrounded by fierce flames, which caused the air around her to twist violently. Every time she took a step forward, the ground would ignite with blazing flames, as if there was fire under her feet, and the road she walked was like a burning path. Amaterasu was the Japanese sun god and also the god with the highest status. She was holding a sword in her hand, which was surrounded by fierce flames, which caused the air around her to twist violently. Every time she took a step forward, the ground would ignite with blazing flames, as if there was fire under her feet, and the road she walked was like a burning path. The Amaterasu summoned by Ise Chuyun stopped in front of the mystical silver fox, and immediately blocked the momentum of the mystical silver fox. At this time, Ise Shinguang immediately shouted at the panicked crowd, "Everyone, don't panic. Whether you live or die, it's right in front of you. If you escape, you will die. If you fight, you will still have a chance to live. Everyone, Amaterasu is looking at us. Even if we are no match for her, let us die gloriously here." Ise Shinguang was usually careless and acted like a free man. But at this time, his words were solemn and stirring, which immediately stopped the people of Shintoism. They were all loyal believers of Shintoism, but they were frightened by the mystical silver fox for a while, and no one stood up to lead them. At this time, someone shouted, and they immediately came to their senses. Shame and anger surged in their hearts at the same time, and their blood was boiling. Kaisai Hikariuni, who was standing to one side, also shouted to the monks of Jinyen Tantrism behind him, "Amitabha. Everyone, today is the day to subdue the demons. We cultivators worship Buddha and believe in the Great Way. Why should we care about our skin? If we die in battle, Buddha will lead us to the Western Paradise. Life is short, like a morning. At this time, in the face of a great disaster, we should sacrifice our lives for righteousness." There were people in charge of Shintoism, and there were also people in Buddhism. At this time, these monks also calmed down. One by one, they bowed their heads and chanted the name of Buddha. Their eyes were high and their expressions were heroic. Ba, we will obey the order. When Kaisai Hikaryuni saw that everyone had finally settled down and their morale had finally been restored, he immediately felt relieved, and then he shouted excitedly, "Formation!" Jinyin Tantrism was one of the three giants of Buddhism in Japan. Its Buddhism power ranked second in Japan, and it was not far from the number one power, i.e. Shinto. Although he had lost to Li Yundong in a fight and lost the throne of Mount Tianwang, the number one expert in the cultivation world of Japan, a centipede would not die. There were tens of millions of believers in Jinyin Tantrism, and there were many young spirit masters among them, who had strong potential in formations. Although he had been killed by the mystical silver fox and his strength had been greatly damaged, as the saying goes, Buddhism in India, Dharma in China, and Buddhist monks in Japan, Japan lacked everything but monks. In the past few days, Jinyin Tantrism immediately made up for it. As soon as Kaisai Hikaryuni shouted, hundreds of monks of Jinyin Tantrism quickly formed a formation. On the other side, the monks of the Tiantai sect and the Pure Land sect also reacted quickly. They formed a formation one after another. For a time, the sound of Buddha's name on the top of the mountain shook heaven and earth. It was majestic and brilliant, and there seemed to be a Buddha's spiritual light in the air. Although the mystical silver fox was extremely fast, Ise Chuyun was risking her life at this time and attacking with all her might. Because she knew that if she didn't use all her strength in an instant to stop the mystical silver fox, the Japanese cultivation world would completely collapse. Even if the Chinese cultivation world wanted to save them, there was nothing they could do. Moreover, after this battle, the mystical silver fox would not give them another chance. Therefore, this time, it was a matter of life and death. Ise Chuyun's attack was exactly in front of the mystical silver fox. The long sword slashed in front of her, and immediately a blazing wall of fire was ignited in front of her. This wall of fire almost connected the sky and the earth, blocking the mystical silver fox. The figure of the mystical silver fox paused. If she had the real body of the divine fox at this time, she only needed to show her real body and hit the wall of fire with her invulnerable and invincible body. Then, the magic would be easily broken by her. However, at this time, the mystical silver fox only had 7 tails. She was not afraid of any magic treasures. The other parts of her body were all rosy. If she bumped into the wall of fire, she might be burned to powder immediately, leaving only 7 tails. The mystical silver fox's eyes narrowed, but she soon sneered, "Can you stop me like this? Childish." The 7 tails behind her twisted quickly and kept growing longer and larger. Originally, the tail was only more than 1 meter long, but now it was more than 100 meters long. From a distance, the 7 golden tails danced like a golden whirlwind. In an instant, there was a strong wind between heaven and earth. The 7 golden tails behind the mystical silver fox danced wildly. They were so fast that their shadows could hardly be seen. The strong wind around them was like a knife. Even if a hard rock was placed in it, it would definitely be cut into countless pieces in an instant. At first, the strong wind produced by the 7 golden tails of the mystical silver fox made the wall of fire more and more vigorous. But not long after, the wind became more and more fierce. The huge rocks at the foot of the mountain were blown away in all directions, and the big trees on the top of the mountain were uprooted. The wall of fire became weaker and weaker. When the power of the wall of fire was half of what it had been before, the 7 huge tails behind the mystical silver fox suddenly slapped towards the wall of fire. With a bang, the wall of fire was completely extinguished in an instant. Amaterasu, who was holding the blazing fire sword, was also smashed into pieces and disappeared. Ise Chuyun spat out a mouthful of blood and fell down on his back without saying a word. The mystical silver fox laughed wildly and said, "How dare you show off your insignificant skills?" After that, her figure flashed and she rushed into the crowd of cultivators from various sects in Japan without any hindrance. At this time, the cultivators of various sects finally got a precious chance to breathe because of Ise Chuyun's desperate stop. They were already ready for battle. When they saw the mystical silver fox pouncing on them, they all shouted and rushed toward the mystical silver fox regardless of their own safety. For a moment, the mountains in the Wuxia Killing Stone scenic area were dark. There were magic treasures flying everywhere, and all kinds of magic arts emerged one after another. Although the mystical silver fox was in the magic circles of various Buddhist sects, she was not afraid at all. She ignored the magic circles as if they were nothing. She killed in and out of them, covered in blood, but not a single drop of blood was her own. At this time, on the opposite mountain ridge, the cultivators of various sects in China, who were about to fight among themselves, were stunned by the sudden change in front of them. Although Du Fei, who had been trying to persuade them to fight, was not at a high cultivation level, his eyesight was quite good. He fixed his eyes on the opposite mountain and immediately blurted out, "Oh no, these Japanese are going to be in trouble. They can't hold on for long." Mao Yuchang and Ding Nan, who had been staring at each other, also looked at each other unconvinced and looked at each other. Zhou Fachang, who was beside them, looked at them with a serious face and said, "The mystical silver fox has made a move." Du Fei said worriedly, "Grandmaster, but Jinren Wang Yuanshan hasn't arrived yet." Zhou Fachang said in a deep voice, "We can't wait for him any longer. If we wait for him any longer, all the Japanese will die. It doesn't matter if they all die. The mystical silver fox will come to deal with us later." Although the Chinese cultivators here didn't like the Japanese, they still understood the principle that the teeth were cold when the clan died. They all took out their powerful magical weapons and were ready to grit their teeth and go forward. To fight with the mystical silver fox, they not only needed great strength, but also great courage, because it was very likely that they would be killed by the mystical silver fox before they could even react, and they would disappear from the world from then on. Zhou Fachang was well aware of this. The reason why he volunteered to lead the team here was that he wanted to leave more seeds for the Chinese cultivation world, which had suffered many disasters. He looked back at the crowd and shouted in a dignified manner, "You are not allowed to go. Stand aside and watch for me. I'll go." His cultivation level was the highest here. Compared with him, everyone's cultivation level was much lower. Zhou Fachang said that he was standing by, but in fact, he was taking care of their faces and didn't want them to die. When the crowd heard this, many of them looked indignant and unwilling, while many of them secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Zhou Fachang stretched out his hand, and a long sword appeared in his hand like a magic trick. In an instant, his body turned into a long rainbow and flew toward the mystical silver fox. Although everyone listened to Zhou Fachang and didn't follow him, Ding Nan felt that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to stand out. She was a newborn calf who was not afraid of tigers. How could she know the horror of the mystical silver fox? She immediately volunteered to follow him. Before leaving, she didn't forget to stab Mao Yuchang. "Hey, I'm a half-baked person. I won't fall behind others. You're a decent person. Do you dare to follow me?" Mao Yuchang was a woman who couldn't stand being teased. She immediately flew into a rage and raised her eyebrows. "Why wouldn't I dare?" After that, she moved faster than Ding Nan and rushed to Zhou Fachang's side in a flash. Everyone, don't wait. I'll make up for the second update tomorrow morning. I'm going to bed. Chapter 849. Zhou Fachang saw a flash of green light beside him, and Mao Yuchang of the Maoshan sect appeared in front of him. The old elder of the Chuanjin dragon sect was shocked. He immediately stopped and shouted, "Nonsense, what are you doing here?" Mao Yuchang quickly glanced at Ding Nan, who was not far away. She straightened her neck and said, "I've been cultivating since I was a child. Is it just to become an immortal? In the face of a great disaster, if we cultivators don't step forward bravely, what can we do?" Her words were dignified. Even Zhou Fachang was choked and didn't know what to say. However, he was old and shrewd. He could see through it at a glance. In fact, it was just a fight between girls. She was only in her early 20s now. She was in her 3rd or 4th year of university. She was young and in her prime. She was also the most proud and arrogant age. When she lost her temper, even the heavenly god wouldn't buy it, let alone the mystical silver fox. Moreover, just now, the mystical silver fox had killed a master at the level of thunder retribution with a bolt of heavenly thunder. They were far away, so they didn't see clearly who had been killed. Even if they saw clearly, they didn't know what kind of status and strength Yoshida Shinura had in the Japanese cultivation world. The ignorant were fearless. Although Mao Yuchang was a good cultivator and was not inferior to Zi Yuan in terms of erudition, she knew nothing about the Japanese cultivation world. She thought that the mystical silver fox had just killed a cat or dog, a nobody. Mao Yuchang didn't know the details, and Ding Nan, who had become a monk halfway, didn't know how powerful it was. The reason why Zhou Fachang didn't want them to come out was that he felt that both of them were rare talents in the Chinese cultivation world. It was rare and commendable for them to have such cultivation at such a young age. He wanted to leave more seeds and vitality for the Chinese cultivation world. However, these 2 little girls were disappointing. At this time, they were fighting. Zhou Fachang looked at the 2 little girls who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He was so angry that he blew his beard and glared at them. But at this time, it was very inappropriate for them to go back. Moreover, even if they survived in the future, they would be very sad, and it would even affect their future cultivation. Zhou Fachang stamped his feet and glared at them. He wanted to scold them, but he forced himself to hold back. He had to hold back his anger and said, "You 2 stay behind me later. Don't act rashly. Otherwise, you can't blame me if your body and soul are destroyed." After that, the long sword in his hand shook, and he let out a long roar. He said loudly, "Mystical silver fox, do you recognize the sword in my hand?" Although his voice was a bit old, it was still loud and clear. His shout echoed throughout the world, and was clearly transmitted into the mountain range opposite of them, which was filled with killing intent. When the mystical silver fox heard this, her heart skipped a beat, and she couldn't help but have some distracting thoughts. She subconsciously looked back, and suddenly, the Japanese cultivation world immediately had precious time to breathe. In an instant, they worked together, and countless magic arts and magic treasures were blasted at the mystical silver fox. This time, the counterattack was shockingly powerful. From afar, a wave of colorful light surged towards the mystical silver fox, like a raging wave that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. The reason why the silver fox had been able to suppress the Japanese cultivation world was that she had always relied on her speed to be faster than theirs. As the saying goes, 1 step faster, all the steps faster. Even the strong magic array set up by the Buddhist cultivators on the mountain ridge could not slow her down. Even the countless magic treasures and magic arts around her could not distract her at all. However, as soon as Zhou Fachang lit up the sword in his hand, a very familiar aura immediately came. The silver fox was shocked. After a thought, her body was a little sluggish, and her speed slowed down a little. It was this point that made the Japanese cultivation world finally catch up and fight back. Although the mystical silver fox was strong, she did not dare to face so many magic treasures and magic arts with her body. The 7 golden tails behind her suddenly rolled up in front of her, like a golden barrier wall, blocking in front of her. There was an earth-shaking sound, and countless magic treasures and magic arts were bombarded on the 7 golden fox tails. Even the mystical silver fox's tail was invulnerable to water and fire, and it was not afraid of any magic treasures, but it could not bear it. It was dented, and the mystical silver fox was forced to retreat again and again, out of the mountain ridge. The silver fox was floating in the air, looking a little angry. With a fierce flick of her 7 fox tails, the barrier instantly turned into a steel whip. She whipped at the mountain, and with a bang, she whipped at the Japanese cultivators. She was like a giant smashing an ant on a mountain with a hammer. When the cultivators of various sects in Japan saw the 7 golden fox tails above their heads smashing down, they all shouted loudly. The chanting of the Buddhist cultivators was even louder, and many huge Vajrayakshas flew out of the magic circle. These Vajrayakshas were all Buddhist gods. Although they resisted the overwhelming attack with a bang, many monks could not stand the fierce shock. They were slapped so hard that the chi and blood in their chests were rolling. They spat out blood and fell to the ground. Fortunately, there were many monks. Some of them fell down, and someone immediately came forward to drag them away. Almost in the next second, someone made up for them, so that the magic circle could continue to be maintained. The mystical silver fox just wanted to vent her anger and to prevent the other party from counterattacking. As expected, after her smash, the cultivators of various sects in Japan on the mountain were a little quiet and did not dare to continue to attack. They were afraid that the mystical silver fox would attack them a few more times. If they were not smashed to death, they would be shocked to death by the rebound force caused by the collision between the spiritual power. Seeing that they had become much more obedient, the mystical silver fox turned her head and looked at Zhou Fachang unkindly. Her blood-red eyes swept up and down for a while, and finally fell on the sword in Zhou Fachang's hand. The long sword was about 2 feet and 3 inches long and 4 inches wide. The body of the sword was full of patterns, more like runes and subtle magic circles. Other than that, there was nothing special about it. At first glance, ordinary people could not recognize what kind of sword it was. However, the mystical silver fox's eyes narrowed. She instantly remembered that when she was besieged by people in China, there were several powerful magical weapons that left a deep impression on her body. The sword in front of her was one of them. The mystical silver fox slowly turned around and turned her back to the cultivators of the Japanese cultivation world. When the cultivators of various sects in Japan saw that the mystical silver fox was so arrogant, as if she had nothing to fear and regarded them as nothing, they were all furious. However, they wanted to attack from behind, but they saw the 7 golden fox tails behind the mystical silver fox hanging upside down in the air like a waterfall. Although they looked calm, they could vaguely see that they had been eager to have a try, as if they were staring at them covetously. In the next second, they would smash the sky and the earth again. The mystical silver fox's voice was cold. She stared at the sword in Zhou Fachang's hand and said, "Is this the immortal trapping sword?" Zhou Fachang was old and shrewd. With a simple sentence, he solved the problem of the Japanese cultivation world. He gently shook the long sword in his hand, and suddenly the immortal trapping sword disappeared in his hand. He said in a long voice, "You have good eyesight. It is indeed the immortal trapping sword." As soon as she heard the name of the immortal trapping sword, Ding Nan didn't understand it because she entered the sect late. However, Mao Yuchang suddenly trembled and looked at Zhou Fachang with her eyes wide open. She knew that there were 5 famous swords in the Taoist cultivation world. The top one was the personal magic weapon of the Yellow Emperor Shenyuan, which was used to kill the 2 ancient fierce gods, Xingtian and Qiyu. The next ones were the Sanhuang sword, the 4 immortal killing swords, the 7 stars sword, and the 8 wilds and 6 swords. The 4 immortal killing swords were forged by the ancient Taoist ancestor Hong Jun with the essence of 5 metals, smelted with the fire of the earth's core, quenched with the water of the cold pool, and then used 81 kinds of extreme poisons in the world to nourish its fierce qi. 81 kinds of rare spiritual medicines to nourish its spiritual qi. When it came out of the furnace, it even made the genuine immortals die with the sword. Later, Hong Jun passed on the 4 swords, namely the immortal killing sword, the immortal killing sword, the immortal trapping sword, and the immortal slashing sword to his disciple, sect leader Tong Tian of the Jie school. With the help of these 4 swords, sect leader Tong Tian formed the immortal killing formation and fought against the Yuanshi Tianzuan, Taisheng Laojun, Amitba, and Patriarch Bodhi alone. The power of these magic weapons could be imagined. These 4 swords each had their own magical uses. The immortal killing sword specialized in killing the soul and yang spirit of a cultivator, the immortal killing sword specialized in killing the body of a cultivator, the immortal trapping sword specialized in killing the wisdom and spiritual consciousness of a cultivator, and the immortal slashing sword specialized in cutting off a cultivator's escape route. Therefore, in the Chinese cultivation world at that time, it was said that once the four swords appeared, they would be invincible in the world. No matter if one was a celestial immortal or a Vajra Arhat, as long as one was in the sword formation of the four immortal killing swords, there was no way to go to heaven, no way to enter the earth, no way to save them, and no way to save them. However, because the four immortal killing swords had to be combined to be extremely powerful, it was ranked behind the Sanhuang sword. Otherwise, with the power of the four immortal killing swords, if the four swords were combined, the power would not be inferior to that of the Shenyuan sword. Even when the mystical silver fox had the real body of the heavenly fox, although she was immune to almost all magic arts and magic treasures, she was still quite afraid of these 5 magic swords. Fortunately, the Shenyuan sword and the 4 immortal killing swords had long been lost. Otherwise, as soon as the 4 immortal killing swords appeared, she would immediately have to flee. Although the mystical silver fox was conceited, she would never think that she was stronger than the 3 religions and 4 saints combined. When she saw that Zhou Fachang was holding the immortal trapping sword that had hurt her 1,000 years ago, she immediately became very vigilant. She couldn't help looking around, as if there was no trace of the immortal trapping sword in the world. Zhou Fachang knew that his cultivation was not as good as that of the mystical silver fox, so he used psychological warfare to deal with her. This psychological warfare could not be used casually. If he hadn't had the immortal trapping sword of the 4 immortal killing swords in his hand, which made her very afraid, she would have slapped herself to death. When Zhou Fachang saw that the mystical silver fox was hesitating as expected, he knew that his plan had succeeded. He said loudly, "Mystical silver fox, since you know this sword, why don't you surrender?" As the saying goes, an old man who doesn't die is a thief. Zhou Fachang was as cunning as a thief. Every word he said was provocative and heart-wrenching. In the eyes of others, the mystical silver fox was afraid that she would have killed someone at this time. However, he made the mystical silver fox more and more vigilant and did not dare to act rashly. Zhou Fachang saw that she was standing there with a gloomy face. Her eyes flickered and she looked around. He said, "Mystical silver fox, if you don't surrender now, you will have practiced your spiritual energy cultivation for 1,000 years in vain." The mystical silver fox narrowed her eyes. She was not angry but shocked. Seeing Zhou Fachang's fearless look, she was suspicious in her heart. But after all, she was not an ordinary person. It was impossible for her to surrender to Zhou Fachang with a few words. The mystical silver fox's heart moved slightly, and her suspicious face suddenly became ferocious. Her body moved, and her fingers were like hooks. In an instant, she appeared in front of Zhou Fachang and said sternly, "Old thing, how dare you lie to me?" Zhou Fachang had been staring at the mystical silver fox with vigilance. When a bad omen flashed in his heart, his body immediately moved and disappeared. As soon as he disappeared, the mystical silver fox tore the shadow of his body into pieces. If he waited for the figure of the mystical silver fox to disappear and then dodged, he was afraid that his body and soul would have been destroyed at this time. As soon as the figure of the mystical silver fox moved, countless swords appeared between heaven and earth in an instant. They rushed towards the mystical silver fox like a storm. This was the immortal trap formation of the 4 immortal swords. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.